Sometimes. If folks want to take their seats, I'm gonna start.
But yeah, I don't mind it. I just want to be sending message to those two.
I don't want to like use the gavel if I don't have to, but I want us to start. Please, I'm ready.
He was on his way.
Okay, okay. I'm just trying to see.
Oh,
Hi. Steve coming through the door. I responded to that.
Yeah, so. It's okay. See,
I don't know any situation that
Okay.
it would never.
Che Guevara was on tonight, man.
All right.
Che Guevara.
I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Clerk Rougeau, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Tucson,
Present.
Councilmember Fellows,
Present.
Councilmember McLean.
Here.
Mayor Brown,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Present.
Councilmember Simmons,
Here.
Councilmember King.
Present.
Have a quorum.
I'll give council members a moment. Gather your thoughts, prepare for the meeting. Entertain a motion for agenda approval.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilmember Tucson, supported by Councilmember King. Any updates or changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. This is our opportunity for public comment. Members of the audience will have 3 minutes to address council. I would typically start with those who are signed up on the list, but there are no names here. But I'll take hands from the audience and then I'll move to Zoom. When I acknowledge you, please approach the podium as you're able and state your name and address for the record if you feel comfortable. Oh. Is it?
It was already recording. It's fine.
Okay, we're good. Okay. All right. Are there any members of the audience who would like to address council? On Zoom? It's okay, Tracy. I know. Things are kind of.
So there are people on Zoom. No one has their hand up. If anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand.
I'll give it a pregnant pause. Seeing none, we'll close audience participation. All right, next on the agenda, we have 2 presentations tonight. The first being from the Housing Commission. I see Zach in the audience. So good evening and please approach the podium. Oh, okay. Thank you. No, I have enough room. I have more. Thank you. It's just like, I like my hand.
There.
Is that? I feel like it's been a while, but it can't. It couldn't have been that long. Do we have it in our packet? Mm-mm.
Have what, presentation?
Yeah, no, it's not. in-
Nope.
On the Civic Plus, I thought maybe it might be. Hooey. Hooey. I.
Me,
I never.
I'm wondering if it's because it's 20 megabytes. I don't know that they'll kick that back, but I can also just send you a link to it.
Man's classes,
The camp.
separation.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
You are. It's good. It's good. Because today was a hard day, so I need to laugh a little bit.
Council, while we are waiting, just an FYI, the PEL presentation has been moved to a May date.
Oh, okay, so we only have one. Okay. Thank you.
EEL.
Okay.
College grants.
Really?
Oh,
Oh,
that's.
And then
yours won't be.
I would use your. Yep.
So this is Zoom on his computer, right?
Um,
'Cause that's what I go through.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
It's not code 7.
I don't know.
Not a-
I wonder if it came out of Detroit. I'm pretty sure that's why.
Sure.
Right? Maybe they're getting the error code soon.
Oh, really?
But they're running out of numbers. That's what I read, at least.
They're using it as-
I just make mine up. You know, area code 123.
Say what?
Almost running time.
With guys that I'm almost wearing.
Sitting between you
In the
guys.
closet, I wear.
Such a new time.
It has been a long day.
I know, I'm serious. This is, I needed it. For fun.
Yes. Oh, of course.
You're right.
1001.
I didn't think,
It's called Jimmy the Greek. That's good.
yeah, I guess. Wow. Thanks. This is a day. It's been a day like that.
What's in that tea you're drinking there, sir?
Oh. It's
Great.
going down. All right, wonderful.
Okay, I think we're good to go.
Good evening again,
right.
Zach. Welcome. We're gonna start over.
Apologies for
Hey,
the
Zach.
delay. Go. Okay, so I know many of you, but not all of you. I'm Zach Fossler. I'm the executive director of the Ypsilanti Housing Commission. Thank you so much for having me tonight. So I wanted to come in and just provide an update with what the YHC's been up to. We haven't spoken in quite a while, and so just wanted to kind of give an overview of a quick historical run through of what we've done in the city, and then just right into 2024 to present pretty much, and then discussing our supportive services activities through the Family Empowerment Program. And then what we're looking forward to kind of heading down the road here. So first up, let's see, my clicker's clicking. Yeah. You going now? Okay. Oops, I went to it. Now it's working. All right. So, mission of the YHC, we are committed to providing affordable housing. We were created by you, the city of Ypsilanti, by ordinance many years ago. And we really pride ourselves in providing the highest quality rental housing in the city, along with supportive services for our residents that can really enable them to get to their highest potential possible and really highest quality of life they can have. So you're probably aware, but if you're not, we undertook a pretty massive redevelopment activities spanning from 2011 to 2018, which included the redevelopment of the former Parkview Apartments, which is now Hamilton Crossing. That's a 144 unit complex. And then the others taking place in 2015 and 2018, which were Strong Future Homes, a former public housing property, and New Park Ridge, also formerly public housing. We went through what was called a RAD conversion through HUD. I won't go into all the weeds and the details of how that happens, but essentially we converted from having public housing funding over to a Section 8 contract. And what that allowed us to do was access outside capital in order to undertake significant redevelopment. So whereas we were getting about $1,000 a year per unit for capital fund improvements, which was never enough to maintain the housing that we had under the public housing program. We then switched over to this other side of the Section 8 contract and accessed low-income housing tax credits, which allowed us to really pull in about $34 million total to do a full redevelopment of both Strong Future and New Park Ridge, which now are really beautiful sites, and we're providing a much higher quality housing for our residents. And so just quickly, this is what our kind of before and after looked like for our sites. So this was Deborah Strong Housing. And secondly, Park Ridge Homes, this is what it looked like before, built in the 1940s, went through a massive redevelopment. We demolished the entire site and rebuilt it to what you have there today. So moving on past the history, I wanted to just talk a bit about, I'm going to pull my presentation up too, just so I can see a little bit clearer. Where we're at, whoops, that's the wrong one, sorry. So where we're at today, our current portfolio, Hamilton Crossing, between the two phases is 144 units. New Park Ridge, like I said, 86 units, and Strong Future Homes, 112, making 342 units of affordable housing within the city of Ypsilanti. Our occupancy has significantly increased, and we're doing great with occupying our units. We certainly got knocked down a bit through the pandemic, and I will discuss that a bit, what that did to our operations, and then what we've done to recover from that and how we're looking forward. And so as of yesterday, our average occupancy for all of our units, we're at 96.2%. And so generally for in housing in general, if you're over 95, we're pretty happy with that. And so, and of those units that are vacant, we have a number of pending leases. So people who are about to move in. So staffing, the YHC is staffed. We run a pretty lean operation for just the YHC itself. We actually only have 2.5 employees. So it's me, my assistant, and we have a part-time government community relations specialist who was brought on in October of in 23. I'm sure you're aware of whom I'm sure you're aware of is Anthony Williamson, and he's been a great addition. When he retired from WCC, he wanted to continue serving the South Side, and so we're thrilled to have him. He's been really great for helping us connect with other partners, finding opportunities, really narrowing in on our residents and how we can best support them, which we'll talk about a little bit here. Oh, and I'm sorry, I skipped right over the, so what we do though, is, so like I said, we're lean, but we contract out for all of our property management services. So we work with a third-party property management company that actually does the property management and maintenance at our properties. So we have 12 full-time employees that work on that team. So that's, I'm not going to read them off to you, but between property management and our maintenance staff. And right now we are fully staffed with the exception of one maintenance tech position, but we have 5 interviews scheduled for Thursday to hopefully get that position filled. Okay, the pandemic was rough on the Housing Commission. It was rough on everyone, but certainly our operations suffered. We recognized significant tenant receivables through that period. I'm sure you're aware of the eviction moratorium that was in place, and there was a lot of assistance available for residents, which was really great at the time to support our residents and make sure they stay housed and they can continue to pay their rent. But unfortunately, it also had the I think, unintended consequence of changing behavior of rental payments. And so what we saw coming out of the time when there was the SARA program, which was providing emergency rental assistance to our residents, a lot of people got their rents paid up. But in the time that the rent wasn't being paid, what we think has happened is essentially that income or that money that was supposed to be paying rent kind of got diverted to other places. And then when it came time to pay rent, it wasn't really available anymore. And so we've had to do a lot of work with our residents just to get back into the behavior of paying rent. And we have made a lot of strides there and are back to pretty solid rent collection now. But for a while there, it really impacted how much money we were bringing into, which then caused us to have payables backlogs. So we owed vendors money. We were losing our trusted contractors and things. We owed them money, so we couldn't work with them. We were having to work with, less preferred contractors who were charged more, which kind of further exacerbated the issue. And then we also had just a lot of staff turnover during that time, which I think a lot of organizations did. And so we had maintenance staff shortages. We weren't able to get into units to even do repairs when during lockdown, with the exception of like emergency work orders. And so then we were seeing a large backlog of just repairs that needed to happen in our units. And so what we did next, though, is we got fully staffed. We got a really great team on. We have had the same property management, like the head property management staff in place now for a few years, and they have really run a great operation. And now we're getting into units, we're doing repairs. We've made enormous progress in getting that backlog addressed, so that we are, once again having our units in good shape. And one of the things that we did have to do is request approval from HUD in order to actually loan money to the properties. Because it turns out, even though we own the properties, because of the way that they're structured now, we can't just provide a loan. We actually had to request that from HUD, get the approval. And the YHC has contributed funds into the properties in order to take care of those existing payables that were out there, and get our trusted vendors, restore those relationships with our vendors, get them back and get our occupancy rates back up. And then what that leads to is, of course, improved resident satisfaction, people, seeing that when they call something in, it's getting addressed in a reasonable amount of time. And then what we're working on now really is we're doing some strategic planning with the board and are really in the process of prioritizing those goals and coming up with a formal plan for what we're focusing on moving forward. And so I did want to talk a fair amount about the Family Empowerment Program. The Family Empowerment Program has been in place now for about 12 years or so. And it's a partnership with Eastern Michigan University. They operate out of Engage at EMU is where that's housed. That being said, the staff fully is really on our sites full time. And so their director works out of the YHC office. They have five social workers that are full time. I'm sorry, 4 social workers that are full time, 5 including the director. Those 4 social workers are placed at the major sites at our properties. So we have them at Hamilton Crossing. We have a worker. We have one at Strong Housing, and then at New Park Ridge we have 2 because we have one that focuses particularly on mental health concerns of our residents, and then one that does supportive housing, so specifically permanent supportive housing. So these are one of our hardest to serve residents that are coming out of chronic homelessness. They come out of the community housing prioritization or CHIP list from the county, kind of the one list that manages all homeless people coming out of homelessness, where they all get placed. And so we have 22 of those units at New Park Ridge. And then we have 8, which I'll discuss in just a little bit here, that we just were awarded for Hamilton Crossing as well. The Family Empowerment Program collects data annually from our residents. It's a pretty sizable survey that is done with. They strive to survey every resident. I can't say that every resident gets surveyed every year. It is a voluntary survey, but they have a pretty good success rate of doing it. And it tracks things like financial stability, their educational outcomes, community engagement, health and wellness metrics. Are kids enrolled in preschool? Do you feel safe in your community? Lots of different questions that just help us assess how our residents are doing. And then also what it really does is help us inform future programming for our residents. So we don't want to just assume that we know what people need. And so what we do is ask, and we look at what the needs are based on the responses we get from those surveys. But one of the things we did start to notice is that, we don't want to ask somebody in February of 2024, what their needs are, and they tell us they need help figuring out how to enroll their kids in preschool and like an annual survey, and we're not reviewing that data until January of 2025, and we've missed the boat on this person who wanted to get their kid into preschool in fall. So in order to kind of address that and have a more timely turnaround to address our residents' needs, is that we are now having more frequent resident feedback sessions to figure out what those are and help inform programming a little more real time. So some highlights. So I did hand out to you all a little packet that goes into a lot more detail of all the great work that the Family Empowerment Program, or FEP, is doing. It kind of goes through by quarter, beginning in 2024 up to present. Some highlights of that. We did receive a Washtenaw County mini grant targeting resident-led initiatives. And so what that covers, so let me get to my pertinent here. I don't really need it. So what that covers is it supports emergency rental assistance and emergency needs, housing needs that our residents have, for one. So when something comes up and we can't access barrier buster funds, or they're expended, or we just have something that maybe doesn't fall quite in there, but we know we need to address this need, it helps us do that in a much more expedient manner. For another, it provides funding to pay our residents. We actually have residents that work in what's called the Caregiving Corps. That's been formed. It was initially started as kind of like a community health worker program, and is now kind of morphed a little bit beyond that, and is not just specifically health focused, but essentially it's residents that are helping other residents in the community, who have needs. And a lot of times it's helping seniors. But yeah, we have residents that are on this, that are on the payroll for this program, and so this helps support their salaries. Another area is our food and nutrition. So we have really ramped up food pantries, and I think that really started. It was happening, I think, pre-COVID, but really through the pandemic, it really started ramping up. And since we have food pantries operating out of several of our sites now, and we are the largest distributor of food for food gatherers on the eastern side of the county. So in Ypsilanti, we're really killing it on food distribution. We have given out, I think, in our last report, that they give us kind of a fiscal year report from June to July, or I'm sorry, July to June. And the one that ended in June 24 here, by Food Gatherers estimate, we handed out over 62,000 meals. And so we're feeling really good about that, and making sure that our residents aren't suffering from food insecurity. Another area that we partner with is with University of Michigan's Center for Multicultural Health. They come in regularly and are doing health cafes with our residents. And so they pick their topics based on what the residents are saying they're interested in, what they think they need. And so it could be coming in to do like blood pressure screenings, talking about diabetes, it's various issues that are important to our residents. And what's really great about it is they might come in and do a screening, but it could be interpreted right there. So there's actually like nurses and doctors that come in to do the presentations. And so it's not kind of like we give you this information and then you don't know what it means exactly. They're getting that like real time in those meetings. So those have been really successful. And those are typically taking place at our Sauk Trail site, which is within Strong Future Homes. The other piece to it is that they have kind of incentive programs. So there's a community store that operates out of that is run by the Strong Future Resident Council. And so they have household goods and items that are just essential items for our residents. So when a resident comes to participate in some kind of program like a health cafe, they actually get kind of this currency that's meant for this community store. and then it can be used to get these items. And so it's kind of a secondary benefit. You're learning, you're, being educated on something that could improve your health and also, meeting needs that you may have at home. Didn't flip, I'm sorry. My apologies for that. I forgot I was flipping on my own screen and not yours. Okay, so we just discussed program highlights. And you probably can't see this at all. It's a pretty small chart there. But if you want to review this later, certainly the slideshow will be available for you now. But what this is just shows programmatic engagement. It's based on how many individuals access the program. And so it is duplicated. So if somebody came, 5 times, they're counted 5 times in there, just so when you're looking at those numbers. But we have kind of, and this doesn't encompass all of our programs. But the things that are listed in here are like senior households at the food pantry, how many adult households are at the food pantry or accessing that. We have a summer youth feeding program, which is what the really large one was. We had 3,428 individual access points from basically counting kids each time they've come just through the summer. So this is just 2024 numbers. We do youth skill workforce and development. So that includes Project Decoded, which I'm going to discuss here. I won't get into yet, but it's a really great program we're really proud of. And also, we partner with the Parker Community Center, WCC. They have basketball programs that are happening in the evenings. It covers youth sports programs. I'm sorry, that one falls in youth sports. We have tutoring going on for kindergarten through 8th grade. We have health education programs, financial education programs. There's substance use support group was started, didn't fully take off for a number of reasons. I don't need to necessarily get into tonight, but it was our first attempt at it, and we were proud of what we did. But there is some issues that we have to kind of figure out just around confidentiality and how people feel comfortable, speaking about substance use with their neighbors and things, and that kind of thing. Moving on. Hey, so yeah, Project Decoded. We're really proud of this. We actually just received an award for this. So we got national recognition for Project Decoded from the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. And what it is it's a generally the cohort of kids that are, it could be anywhere from 12 to 20 kids, teens for the most part, and they are operating out of Hamilton Crossing, and they are learning coding. And so we wanted to, essentially provide our teenagers with a safe place, social interaction in a safe space with safe adults. There's 2 of our social workers are running the program. They come in twice a week, and they are for 3-hour sessions for each session they come in. It's like an after school thing. And it goes for generally 4 to 6 months is one cohort of kids. And so they're really coming in frequently. And through that process, they're working on some kind of coding program. So they come in half the time. We partner with Senpai Tournaments, who's like a video game tournament company. They come in, they play video games for half the time, and he sets up all this cool stuff and all the video games everywhere. Kids have a lot of fun, and then they have dinner. They provide dinner as well. They eat, and then they spend the other half of that time learning to code. And so we partner with Code 313 out of Detroit, who is they're a nonprofit that does STEM education and especially coding education. And so they come in, teach coding, work on the projects with the kids. They work on that through that whole period of time. And then when they finish, that we have the kind of the celebratory event at the end, where we've been providing prizes. Like there could be laptops that are provided, gaming systems. It's some pretty significant stuff because it's a pretty big commitment for kids to be able to really take on. Doing like a 6-month program and coming twice a week, and you miss 3 times for the most part, other than kind of extreme exceptions. That's it. You can't participate in the program anymore, and so they take it very seriously. And we're proud to say that of those, I think we're in our 3rd session now, and we've had already 2 of these kids who have been taken on. They started as interns with Code 313. And one of them now is one of the main teachers for Code 313. He's hired with this nonprofit. So yeah, it's just it's seeing kind of like this workforce development. We didn't realize how quickly it would start happening when we've got a 17-year-old that starts interning at this organization. And then the other kid that went on to be an intern with Code 313 is now working for the city of Detroit. He's working with, I think, their planning department and flying drones and whatnot. Yeah, it's a really great program. So that was funded by the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, but the initial seed money from that was a grant from them, but it was through the city of Ypsilanti, and so you all were the reason that we actually got to do this thing in the first place, which was awesome. So the first iteration of it came through a grant, like I said, through them, through the city. I think the person at the city that we were working with had moved on to another position. And we just went straight to the community foundation on our next iteration of it. And so now we're getting direct funding from the community foundation to support that. It certainly is a labor of love. These social workers are coming in and working, they both have families and things going on. They're coming in working 2 nights a week through these sessions. It's a big commitment. We're definitely looking for additional support around how to continue this program because it is really changing these kids' lives and giving them just such a positive place to be in. And it's a really great skill. The other exciting thing is a few years back here, Commissioner Somerville at the county came to me. I guess she was she was wearing her Senator Jeff Irwin hat in that capacity and asked us, it was when they were looking for what projects organizations might have to pitch. And so I kind of threw some out there. One of them was just an idea I had about wouldn't it be cool if we had a space for teens at one of our properties where we could do, have computers and video games and that kind of thing, set up esports tournaments and whatnot. And that was kind of before Project Decoded had started. And then, so I passed that along, didn't think we would see much of it. We had never gotten funding from the state before. And then Project Decoded had started kind of independently by one of our social workers. And then we got news that they actually wanted to fund this teen space, which is a kind of a gaming and coding center. And so we're thrilled to say that we've gotten a grant from the state of Michigan for $200,000 to put in really a state-of-the-art gaming and coding facility within Hamilton Crossing. And so we're going to be gutting the existing computer lab that is there, redoing everything in there, putting in gaming computers, and then redoing, like lighting, flooring, everything in there. And then also doing some like AV improvements and other kind of tech improvements within the building. And so what we're seeing, of course, Project Decoded would operate out of this, but we can really kind of take it for beyond that. And do other kinds of youth programming in there, educational stuff. And so we're very excited about that. The one thing about it is that $200,000 really needs to just be spent on the capital side of it. So we can't spend that on any of our programming. And so where we're struggling is my dream is that we can get another full-time social worker that is really dedicated to youth programming at our sites that will be so that we can actually have this space open and available more frequently for our teens, because it's given like kind of the expense of it all. It's not a space that we can just kind of have, you just go in and out whenever you want. It needs to be monitored and supervised and that kind of thing. And so what we're looking for now is to figure out how we fund the services for to keep that space open more often. Flip it again, I'm sorry. Okay, so next up, as a part of that mini grant that I mentioned before, we have really refocused on our resident councils. We are desperate for just feedback from our residents, more than just when something really bad is happening and you kind of only hear from, the 3 residents that have an issue and they may perhaps come to a board meeting, or just it rises up to my level and we deal with it. We need better feedback from our residents. And so one of the ways we can do that is by having them organized within their sites. And so we have formalized now a resident council for Strong Future. They are meeting regularly, really taking on all kinds of community stuff. I mentioned, they're running the store. They have a lot of activity going. But we also need that for our Hamilton Crossing site and for our New Park Ridge site. And so we have Anthony Williamson now is really spearheading that effort. And this year we'll be focusing on, he is meeting with our residents and focusing on kind of formalizing those organizations and, helping them understand what it is to be a resident council, how to focus on improving the community you live in. That it is a place to help resolve if there are issues, that people have with management, but even more so, it's about, how can we just overall improve the community that we live in? And so Anthony's really excited to be working on that. We did write into that mini grant about $6,000 to be able to just support that work so that we can even bring in somebody who can provide like a training to residents who are interested in serving on the council, how you run a meeting, Robert's Rules of Order, all those things. Anyway, so we're quite excited about that. We do have a partnership with Supreme Felons to just help us kind of, each summer when it starts to warm up, I'm sure you all hear about it. When it starts getting warm, things start getting a little wild. People start coming out and activity really ramps up. We start seeing more activity in our parking lots. People kind of just hanging out, parties start popping up. Over the years, we've tried a lot of different things in order to address that. We've had great partnerships with YPD. Looking forward to seeing who our new chief will be so that we can reestablish that connection there and make sure that we're partnering as closely as we were with the former chief. And what we want to, one of the ways we can do that though is with Supreme Felons. Supreme Felons has been really helpful for when there is activity happening and they can kind of come in to the community, and it's not in like an aggressive police manner. It's just coming in, the connections they have with folks and the ability they have to just interact and say, hey, you got to calm this down, and just, or they know somebody's parents, or they're really quite good at resolving some of those things before they pop up. And so that we're not seeing, heaven forbid, like the shootings that we've seen at points in the past. We had actually a surprisingly calm summer last year. Everyone thought we were going to have a much hotter, a lot more activity, and we didn't see it like we were expecting. And so one of the other things, I've served on the community violence intervention team for the county for about 3 years now. Been an active participant there, and really our goal is to essentially eliminate gun violence in our community because it's something that really impacts our residents. And then beyond that, we also, we hold regular community events. So we have National Night Out. YPD has been a great partner in that. They show up. Many of you have come to our National Night Out events. Thank you. Our residents really love it. I get questions every year about, are we doing that again? We go to Rutherford Pool, have a big party down there. We have a number of community partners that are offering whatever support they have, all the different services they provide. And so that's been a great event. We also do voter engagement. So when it's time to get people registered and things, we are getting them registered. Their family empowerment program staff are taking people to the polls. We want to get our residents out to vote as best we can. And then last, just holiday celebrations, any kind of holidays, we're holding events, we're having dinners, we're doing Thanksgiving, we're doing Christmas, all that kind of stuff. We're doing Christmas presents. We do gifts each year, each of our sites. We partner with the Delta, Theta, Sigma kind of alumni come in. There's a number of organizations that have come to just provide gifts for our residents, and that's been a wonderful thing too. And then looking forward, like I said, we are currently working on our strategic plan. And so what do we want to, oh, thank you. Oh, you could just, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that would be great. We're on the right one now. I only missed one this time. So, okay, thanks. So we are working on our strategic plan. We have a really great and engaged board. We have a 5-member board, which that is set by state statute. I think we have one of our board members, Teresa Gelati, here tonight, our newest board member. And they've been really good about, they do care about our residents and really focusing on how we're supporting them, asking the right questions. And so I think you can be proud of the people that are serving the city in that capacity. They are dedicated. One of our board members, Renee Smith, has also really dove into housing. She is now a trainer for the national organization that we belong to, NARO. So she's traveling the country, doing trainings for other housing commissions, teaching other housing commission board of commissioners how to be a board, how to operate well, all those things. She served as our board chair for many years. We recently just switched over to a co-chair format, and so now we have Lavisa Brown and Lakeisha Williams as our co-chairs. Both have deep ties to the housing that we operate. And so, just great board. Happy to answer any questions about that. Another thing that we're working on is a case management software initiative. So where we're lacking in the family empowerment program is we have really great numbers, like these charts that you'll see when you can actually see them, of the kind of programming that we're providing. But that's only one piece of what the FEP staff do. The other side is the case management piece. And so it's when there's a crisis, so there's some urgent matter that pops up, people that need support right now. How are we helping them through that? How are we helping doing mental health support with folks? It's a fairly scattered right now as to how we're documenting that. So we don't have great numbers on, how many interactions we're having, all those things. But the way we can do that is by having an actual like formal case management system so that we are tracking each resident and when you're touching base with them, what you're doing with them. And that will help us kind of tell that story better as far as that type of support that we're giving, because it's significant. But we don't have a great way of showing it. And so that's something we're working on this year. We're applying for a grant with the Michigan Health Endowment Fund in order to fund that whole process of finding a software, integrating it with our current housing software, that kind of thing. And then we are pursuing additional funding opportunities, again, through Michigan Health Endowment Fund, Trinity Health, United Way of Southeast Michigan. And we want to increase the affordable housing units in the city. To be honest, that was where we were heading right pre-COVID. We had a lot of development activity happening, looking at sites, analyzing. COVID hit, it really kind of shut down that whole process. And we needed to just focus on what we had and make sure we're taking care of the residents that we had and the units that we have, and then really recovering from the impact that all had on us. And so we are looking forward now. One of the things, if you want to flip to the next one, one of the things that we could use help with from the city is just a proactive relationship with you all. When you have people approaching you about affordable housing, you have ideas around sites, potential projects, we want to be a part of that conversation. You created us. We're your affordable housing developer that's literally created by the city, and we're in the city. And so please reach out. We want to hear from you. Other areas that we could, that would be helpful for us. Services are really hard to fund. Since its inception, Family Empowerment Program has essentially been funded by contributions from the Ypsilanti Housing Commission and a patchwork of grants that are just from a variety of sources. And it is a constant struggle and source of anxiety as to like how we're going to keep this thing going. And we always do. We find it, but it's not easy. And it is, we could be doing a lot more. We should have twice the number of social workers that we have working on our sites if we really wanted to provide true intensive case management services. So ways that we could potentially fund those. One is, so the Hamilton Crossing sites, phase 1 and 2, were developed prior to my tenure here. They are, unlike the other 2 sites that we have, New Park and Strong, which both have a pilot on them, they pay full property taxes, which is pretty unusual for a low-income housing tax credit property to pay full property taxes, and they have since they were put in back in 2011-ish. There's 2 phases. And so we've been, I think we paid over $115,000 in property taxes for the Hamilton Crossing 1 and 2 last year. That would be really helpful for funding the programs and services that we do. So just something for consideration. Another is city rental inspections. I know they're incredibly important, and it's an important part of the role of the city to ensure that we have quality rental housing in our city. That being said, we also receive regular inspections from MISTA, HUD, Scenair, who is our tax credit syndicator on those projects, our insurance providers. We're getting a lot of inspections already. And so the inspections just themselves pull staff, like property management and maintenance staff, away from the tasks they need to be working on, so that they can go and, walk with the inspector, handle all the responses, the letters, all the things. So that's one side of it. The other side is they're expensive. I mean, they cost us a significant amount of money as well when we're already getting inspected in other places. And so just another thought for your consideration is, does it make sense to require the city inspections and charge the housing commission that was created by the city for those inspections when we're really already getting pretty intensive inspections from HUD and MISTA? And then I think that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm happy to answer questions best I can.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being here. And that was very thorough. I really appreciate it being updated on what's happening. Great to see. I'll entertain questions or comments from council. Councilmember King?
I do have just a few questions, and I was wondering if we could give a response to what Zach asked about inspections. Are they required?
Currently, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, I just wanted you to have an answer before you left
yeah.
today. That's something that we cannot stop doing. I know you mentioned the decoding program, and you said you were looking for like a social worker in that area, and I heard you say others as well. What is the outreach? And what would the hours be for that
Um,
program specifically?
So there isn't any outreach yet because we don't have the funding to support it. So really, we need the funding dollars in order to support that position in the first place. But were we to get the funding for that, it would likely be more of an evening related thing, with the exception being probably summers, right? Because kids are out of school. But when kids are in school, yeah, you're talking, evening, kind of like working at a community center. So out of school hours to, I would assume probably 8 or 9 or somewhere around there. And then just to respond to the rental inspection thing, yeah, I'm aware that it's required by city ordinance and things. But there are cities that have actually worked with their local housing commissioners or housing authorities to create exceptions for that because they understand that there's already these inspections happening in other capacities. And so, I'd be happy to, we don't have to kind of get into all of that tonight. If you, it's there's probably a more detailed discussion that could be had, but I kind of just wanted to put it on your radar, if there is some interest in, working through that.
Okay, thank you.
Briefly piggyback on Councilmember King's question about that. Are there ways to maybe also work collaboratively with like MISHA and HUD to have those inspections happen at the same time so that it's not happening all throughout the year and sending folks out multiple times, take staff away from time with?
MISTA and HUD, MISTA is required to inspect all voucher holders' apartments. We've spoken with them recently to better coordinate, and MISTA explained that they're kind of looking at different things than the city is, but I can try to get more information on that.
Councilmember Simmons. And then-
Yeah, this is actually just continuing on that. So just another question, which is, do we have other properties outside of what the Housing Commission has that has these like kind of multiple inspections?
So to maintain your certificate of compliance, you are inspected every 2 years.
I know what I'm saying is, are there other besides the Housing Commission that would also be inspected by MISTA? I'm just trying to get a sense
we do.
of
Sure.
what kind of,
And-
Yeah.
like it, an exception. If there's a lot of other ones, then that would probably be a lot to think about what a carve out would look like.
Any MISTA property is going, or any voucher holder will be inspected by MISTA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
Councilmember McLean?
Thank you, Mayor. I think in one of your slides, there was in your strategic planning, thinking about the future, reference to having more units. Can you say more about that? What is your capacity to do more? What's your planning?
Yeah, so we do run a lean out organization, right? We haven't done our development all in-house by any means. We have partnered with an external developer. We actually have used the same developer for all 4 of our deals. They've been a really wonderful partner for us, Chesapeake Community Advisors out of Baltimore. And not only do they, help us kind of get through the deals and figure it all out, they've been very fair about, sharing kind of the proceeds of that, the developer fee, that kind of thing. But also sticking in it with us in the long run. So they continue to help us with asset management. They help us make, just reviewing the property financials on a regular, interacting with MISTA, all the kind of the entities that we have to report to. They've been there all along helping us out, and which is great. So yeah, I would say right now, no, we don't have the capacity to say, yeah, let's go do that deal. We'll do it all at the Housing Commission. I do think over time we could build that capacity. We've seen it happen. Ann Arbor Housing Commission had a lot more deals they needed to do, and did in a larger staff, just in organization in general. And so they did build that capacity in house. We didn't go that route, but so I would say, yes, we're interested in development. We have done deals now. We kind of understand how the process works. But we would be bringing in a partner to help us kind of evaluate and make sure it's a good deal. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily have to be Chesapeake. We do have a lot of trust built with them, but, you know, certainly would, you know, entertain other developers, of course. We didn't make it a, you know, a transparent process. But yeah, as far as looking forward, we, right now, honestly, we've been really focused on just what I've covered today is just supporting our residents and making sure that we're getting back up. Like we're just getting back to where we needed to be financially and getting our properties in good shape, getting a solid management staff in place and making sure that they're doing what they need to do. I didn't feel good about, I kind of put the brakes and discussed it with the board and with their blessing, you know, like we need to put the brakes up for a while here on further development because I don't want to expand if we don't have our own house in order. And so I feel we do now. But we didn't for that period of time through the pandemic. And so it wasn't, and even just, you know, just coming out of it, we didn't. And so we weren't in a good spot to be able to just start, yeah, let's get bigger when we are already having issues. And so I feel much better about where we're at now. But yeah, so if there are like, what I mean basically is if there are sites that we know of in the city or there are city properties that, you know, you're looking to discard or in that way, then yeah, we're certainly interested. Or if there's partners that, you know, are talking about, you know, we want to provide affordable housing in some way, you're thinking, who can we connect them with? Like, we want to have a conversation. It doesn't always mean that we will be the right partner, but we certainly want to be at the table and they have the opportunity to. Because the one thing about developers in general, you know, there's lots of great ones and there's some really terrible ones too, which I'm sure you're aware of and having considered lots of people have come before you here. And, you know, one thing about the YHC is we're not going anywhere. You know, you created us again. And so we're here for the long run. When we develop a property and we say it's going to stay affordable, it's going to stay affordable. That's literally our mission. Like we don't have any dream about let's keep it affordable for this period of time and then, you know, kick everybody out like we saw at some other properties in the area. And so that's not what we do.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to say I appreciate your obvious sensitivity to the need for wraparound services. Obviously, keeping people in housing is not about just having a roof over their head. That's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And I enjoyed hearing your comments about the work you're trying to do and hope to continue doing and perhaps more of it. This next question is one that I'm worried I'm going to have to ask of a lot of people, but have you gotten any news from HUD that makes you worried about future federal funding?
Well, I was just in DC 2 or 3 weeks ago. NARO, the organization I mentioned earlier, had their Washington conference out there where we go advocate on the Hill and met with our reps and senators and our rep and our senators to discuss, you know, priorities and what we need. And yeah, I mean, I think we all know there's a lot of uncertainty at the federal government right now. And as far as specifically the Housing Commission is concerned, we made a decision when we did our conversion out of public housing. We had 2 options for Section 8. So one is under the Office of Public Housing, and the other side is under multifamily. We chose to go under multifamily for a number of reasons, but one of them is that the multifamily side of HUD tends to be a much more stable funding stream. And so, and the reason for that is because the multifamily side is where most of private owners who have affordable housing properties, that's generally where their contracts are, not on the public housing side. And because they're the private owners and they have much deeper pockets and much stronger lobbying power, they get funded. I mean, it's when you look at the funding for the HUD programs over the years and you see them all kind of doing this, PBRA is just project-based rental assistance. Sorry, that one just stably funded year after year. And so I'm not terribly concerned right now that our Section 8 funding is going to get cut or really even be diminished much, which is great for us. But yeah, we certainly worry about it. I mean, we have other programs that, you know, are it's kind of indirectly get funded by the federal government. You know, it could be money that's coming in through the county and comes to us, and then suddenly that contract's being pulled. But so far, we actually haven't seen much impact on any really on our like financial operations and that kind of thing. And so we've been lucky, I think, and I'm happy with the choice that we made so many years ago. But yeah, it's certainly our partners and my colleagues around the country are seeing all kinds of crazy stuff happening with funding. And yeah, we're just in a more fortunate situation.
Madam Mayor, finally, just a comment. I'm always pleased to see your references to my old friend Deborah Strong.
Mm.
I served on the Housing Commission with her
Oh, wow.
some years ago, and
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've seen your name on the old minutes and things, actually. Now that's why.
yeah, and yeah, she was a neighbor, she was a friend, she was a mentor. She's, in my mind, one of the greatest people that's ever lived out of Ypsilanti, Michigan. Absolutely adored her and really miss her. But I'm glad to see that you're keeping her legacy alive.
Thank you. Yeah, she was incredible. She was on the board when I was hired, and so yeah, I got to work under her for about a year or so before she passed. And yeah, she was incredible, and the work she did around the state was awesome.
Rose?
Yeah, you brought up the Ann Arbor Housing Commission and how they've built capacity for building, I guess, an administrative capacity. And so I'm just curious because I don't know a lot about the Ypsi Housing Commission, except that it's been described as almost like a separate entity from the city. And so I'm wondering if you could compare and contrast between the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, and the Ypsi Housing Commission a little bit, like what are the distinct differences?
Yeah, I can tell you what I know. I don't know everything about the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, but certainly I can point out some differences. I mean, we are a separate entity from the city. I mean, we're a commission of the city, but we are you appoint our board essentially, and so we have our own tax ID, all those things. Ann Arbor, I believe, also. I actually don't know for sure whether they're a department of the city or whether they're a separate entity. I know that many of their employees are unionized, like within the union that the city has. That's not the case with us. Ann Arbor has a Section 8 program. We do not. That was unfortunately right before I took this position 12 years ago. It was lost to MSHDA. There was some mismanagement of it, and basically HUD kind of strong-armed the board at the time to voluntarily, I put that in quotes, give the Section 8 program over to MSHDA. And so the Section 8 vouchers that the YHC used to have, which is a significant number of vouchers, I think it was somewhere around the number of units we have, like 340-ish, then went over to be administered by MSHDA and continue to be. And so those are largely administered by their contractor, Community Management Associates, or CMA. Other differences between the city. So one of the choices we had to make when we did our conversion from public housing over to Section 8 was that we knew we were applying for low-income housing tax credits. We were also like Ann Arbor, very early adopters of the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program for HUD, which allowed you to do that conversion. And in order to access those tax credits and to be really competitive on a tax credit application, you need to show that you have experience managing a tax credit property, and we didn't really have that. The only tax credit property we had at the time was Hamilton Crossing, and it was managed by a third party. And so we weren't able to kind of get those points to make our application more competitive. And so that was when we made the decision to really go from having in-house property management maintenance staff over to using a third-party property management. And it sounds like that we just like wiped out staff. That wasn't how the transition happened. That was under my tenure here. And so we actually had a number of our people took jobs with the property management company. Some filed for retirement, just decided they didn't want to do that, and retired. And we actually only had to do one termination just due to a background check that wouldn't pass with the company. And so it was a fairly smooth transition, but it did make it so we became more asset managers than property managers at the YHC. Ann Arbor took a different route, and one that some of my colleagues did as well around the state that we just weren't aware of it, that we could do at the time. We learned it later after the fact, which was you have the ability to kind of like bring in a property management company to essentially sign their name on the tax credit application and provide like oversight and training and compliance stuff for your existing staff. We just weren't aware of it, to be honest, at that time. And so, yeah, that's how we ended up where we are. It has its benefits. It has its drawbacks. Lack of kind of just different level of control, and the interaction with staff and all those things just are different. I'm still happy with it. With the work we've done. But yeah, it did make it so we don't have that same in-house capacity to just take on a property to go manage it and that kind of thing. So those are some of the differences.
What is in-house and at this point? Is there
So in-house, certainly our supportive, I mean, really our supportive services technically are not, right? It feels like they are because they're always on our sites. Their director works in my office, but they come out of EMU. And so in-house, we're asset managing essentially. So we're the administration of the YHC. That's why we're so lean. We don't, and I mean, even our financial transactions, of the YHC are pretty limited. We keep our expenses down, all those things so that we can operate in this way. But yeah, that's what it looks like
How many positions are there?
at the YHC, 2.5.
And yeah, I'll follow up with more questions about the structure and that stuff because I don't know as much. But I am curious about the housing ordinance or housing commission ordinance. It seems like the funds are completely separate from the city's budget. So as I understand it, the city manager doesn't have any role in like overseeing staffing or budget of the housing commission, correct?
That's, yeah.
And so I'm also curious from your perspective, like how durable the institution as it is now, as far as exploring like other housing models, such as social housing, which, you know, has generally known for its like more integrated income level, and also for, you know, like community amenities in addition to housing. So third spaces and sometimes indoor pools, food courts, things like this. And also would draw in income in a different way too, because it's soliciting people to live there of incomes from like 0 AMI to 120% sometimes. So does this fit within the Housing Commission ordinance as it is now? Like if for instance, if there was property going into receivership and there was an opportunity for the city or the Housing Commission to buy, is that something we could look to as far as a different housing model?
I certainly would want to consult with, you know, like general counsel and things to fully answer that, but I believe so. I don't think there's anything that prohibits us from that. As long as what we're generating as far as proceeds go are going to our mission, then yeah, I think we can do that kind of work. But yeah, I would really want to look closer at the state statute and things to make sure of that. But I have seen other housing authorities kind of around the country doing it, but you know, what the Michigan rules are in Michigan, I couldn't say specifically. But it's been brought up before, just this idea. It kind of keeps changing names, but it's like workforce housing at one point or social housing or just all these different, just kind of that missing middle piece of, you know, there's folks that also can't afford housing, but don't necessarily fall in that really low income, like 30% AMI group. And so I think that there is space for that, but I wouldn't want to definitively answer that tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I have one more quick question. You mentioned Hamilton Crossing and how they pay for property taxes. I was just wondering, you said that is a little unusual. I was just wondering if I could get a little background on that. Is that unusual for properties like Hamilton Crossing?
I'd have to do some research, but the other properties do have a pilot. I'm not entirely sure why there wasn't a pilot applied when Hamilton Crossing Phase 1 and 2 are completed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had one question. Thank you for the presentation. The contrast with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission was also helpful. Earlier you were talking about you know, trying to recover from the pandemic, and you made a comment about making loans to the properties, and so I got really confused because you own the property. So you know, what institution is loaning and what institution money?
Sure. I'm using the term owning a little loosely. So we are the general partner in each. So essentially, when we converted under the access tax credits, part of doing that is you have to create separate entities that for each property. And so Hamilton Crossing Phase 1 is its own LLC. There's a whole kind of entity structure that follows, which we're the controlling general partner of. And so we have limited, you know, investors and those kinds of things that have actually put the money in to provide the capital to do the work in the first place. But if you looked up on Map Washtenaw and, you know, saw who the owner was, it's going to show, you know, Hamilton Crossing Limited Dividend Housing Association, blah, 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 limited partnership, and so on for each property. And so we are they would, when you're talking about, talking about ownership, it's us. But yeah, it's kind of like indirectly through this series of entities. And one of the reasons that exists is because in order to get the tax credits that these like large investors want, it's mostly banks, like large insurance companies, that kind of thing, that have profits. They want to write off those. They want tax credits for those, so they put money into the deals. Then they get tax credit back essentially. But in order to be able to claim that, the property itself actually has to be kind of like designed as this almost like for-profit entity in order to claim the tax credits. And so that's why.
Does each of those properties have a separate board for the LLCs?
No.
You're the controlling partner? Are there multiple partners for each of those properties?
Yes. Yeah. There's it depends on the property, but yeah, there are certainly one of the YHC's entities that would be like where we show up. We also, because we have a nonprofit development arm, Ypsilanti Washington Housing Corporation, and so that's the entity that kind of acts as the developer. And then there would be like the tax credit syndicator is often in there, which would be Sinair. And then often the investor themselves, so like Bank of America or KeyBank, depending on the property.
Okay. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I mentioned one. So one other difference between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti housing commissions as well is that Ann Arbor receives pretty significant but like funding from the city itself too, just to support their budget. So I don't know what it was. I mean, I remember when I came in, maybe when I started here maybe 12 years ago, I think it was like $300,000 at that time. I don't know what it is these days, but that's just one other difference between the two.
Any further comments or questions for? I guess my last question was, you talked about the resident councils. What locations have them and which ones don't?
So Strong Futures is formed and formally has the president and the various officers and everything. Hamilton Crossing certainly has a group of residents that have started meeting, that Anthony is now meeting with, kind of starting that talk about organizing and how to focus on, what they're focusing on, that kind of thing. And then New Park Ridge, we have some residents that are certainly interested in it and have expressed interest, but that's where we're at.
Oh, Strong, 'cause I know.
Yeah, but it's strong.
Got it. Thank you so much.
right.
This was very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okie doke. Okay, so the next presentation is not happening.
Correct.
All right, so then we'll move on to resolutions. Councilmember Fellows, you have our first resolution, 054.
Resolution number 2025-054, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the minutes of March 18th, 2025 City Council meeting be approved, and I so move.
Then moved by Councilmember Fellows, supported by Councilmember Tucson. Any changes, updates, comments, questions? Seeing none, Clerk Joe, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson, Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucson, you have our next resolution, 055.
Yes,
Or ordinance, yeah.
yes, resolved by the council of the city of Ypsilanti that the attached ordinance entitled an ordinance to amend chapter 71 Administrative Hearings Bureau of the Ypsilanti City Code by amending Article 2 Administrative Hearing Bureau, Section 71-33 Administrative Hearing Officer Powers and Duties, Section 7134 Administrative Hearing Officer Training Requirements, and Section 7143 Violations of Orders and Failure to Pay Civil Fine and Cost to update to be in compliance with state law is adopted in its entirety upon final reading, and I so
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Tucson, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
This is a second reading. If council has any further questions, myself or City Attorney Barker could answer.
Councilmember Fellows?
Yes, just one moment. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say. But our first ordinance reading, there was a resident here to bring Charlotte Crossan, who spoke about some of the legal definitions. And so I just wanted to highlight this because also Charlotte's attorney as well, that I hear Randy knows of for a very long time. But she brought up that there's basically it's harder to waive fines and costs than it is to impose them with how the ordinance is set up right now. She talked about how there is the legal definition of clear and convincing evidence is being used for waiving fines. And this is a evidentiary standard that is higher than preponderance of evidence. So she's basically pointing out it's kind of like unequal as far as we can more easily impose fines, but it's harder to waive them. So I think that might be something to consider as an amendment. I don't know if anyone or the city attorney has comments on this.
I do, if, so at least as a matter of order, because this is a second reading, the council is free to amend a proposed ordinance at the time of second reading, which it can do tonight. So, that's perhaps the first point to a question that wasn't asked, but presumed. So in terms of fines and costs, there is generally, even applicable to judges, very limited discretion to waive fines and costs. In fact, under the Michigan court rules, a judge can only waive fines and costs as it relates to an individual, not a public or private entity. And that is something that council could consider amending this provision 10 sub 3 to address as well. But again, it's pretty easy standard to meet if the individual is indigent, is below 125% of the poverty line, which is the standard under the Michigan court rule for cases before a judge. So those are things to consider. If you want to relax that to preponderance of the evidence, I don't think there's really an issue with that. I just still think that the burden is on the claimant or the respondent, I'm sorry, to establish that there's going to be some sort of significant financial hardship because they're indigent, as that standard typically applies. But again, if we're going to relax that, I think it would be appropriate to clarify as part of the amendment that fee reduction opportunity only applies to individuals and not to entities. You know, we have a fiscal responsibility to not operate city departments at a loss, you know, in terms of the council does anyway. And so that, you know, when there is, I suppose, a knee-jerk willingness to relax imposition of fines and costs, particularly on organizations that have the ability to pay, then that creates a financial problem for the city in order to fund that particular department. And that is a significant financial undertaking, as I'm sure city manager and the city clerk will attest, to operate the Administrative Hearings Bureau. Because what it's really doing is it's functioning as a quasi judicial organization that takes an incredible amount of financial burden off of our district court and really imposes it upon us. And there are actually mandatory fees that have to be paid. There's a justice fee of $10 that cannot be waived even by the hearing officer, but other fees can be waived. Other fines and costs established by council can be waived without any sort of articulation in the record of why those were waived. I don't necessarily agree with the other attorney who spoke to differing burdens of proof, because the council does annually establish fines and costs for the AHB. So those are presumed to be necessarily imposed unless there is a reason for the hearing officer not to impose those. And so this is just simply a manner in which the hearing officer retains some discretion, but must articulate why that discretion was exercised in order to keep a more preserved record in case there's an appeal of something as it relates to a hearing officer's decision, because those appeals are to the circuit court, and those the record that is usually transmitted to a circuit court is very limited. It's actually the decision itself, checking a box. Now there actually has to be written findings of fact and conclusions of law in order to comply with the new state law, which goes into effect tomorrow. And then, so the same standard should apply effectively upon the hearing officer to articulate why the fines and costs were reduced. But what I would suggest, particularly in response to your thought, Councilmember Follows, is if you wish to lower that standard, I think it would probably be appropriate to articulate in an amendment to that section that only, and again, this is up to the council, but perhaps it should only apply to individuals and not to organizations. And I can quickly suggest some language to that effect. Yes, ma'am.
I would be in support of that, so that, you know, that it applies to individuals and not to entities. There is another area that I looked at that I'm also curious about lowering or relaxing a bit, because there is like a misdemeanor fine of 500 or jail time of 90 days. I know this is like a standard that was in there before, but I'm just wondering what, you know, if this is necessary for this entity to be doing, if it's like by state statute, or if it's something that we can take out the jail.
That's in the amended statute.
Uh-huh.
It was a new section added towards the end of it. And in other parts of it, it basically imposes the risk of jail time or misdemeanor penalties predominantly upon an entity, not an individual, who is predominantly an individual who's a homeowner. It differentiates those folks and imposes a civil infraction penalty on them instead. But the statute does mandate that a person who fails to pay fines and costs or remedy the problem which brought them before the AHB in the first place is potentially subject to a criminal penalty if they don't comply with either the payment or the abatement within 30 days.
That's
So
state statute?
that's
Okay.
exactly what the state's.
And you said it's in here, it is separated between entity and individual.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just if others are in support of this, if the city attorney can suggest the amendment.
Which section? I'm sorry.
That would be
And
section 10, sub 3, which talks about the actual powers of the hearing officer.
Oh, there you go.
And as you roll down, it says the hearing officer does not have the power to do certain things, such as impose a $10,000 or more fine. So if you go down to sub 3, it begins with waive or reduce any fines, fees, or costs established by the city council for such violations, unless reasonable mitigating factors for reduction of a fine are established by the respondent. Again, it should be the respondent's burden to show that they are unable to pay or shouldn't have to pay the full amount of the fine and why. The easiest example would be indigency, which is the same as the applicable rule in the courts. So if I understand you correctly, Councilmember Fellows, you wanted to reduce that to preponderance of the evidence?
Let me just double check my notes. Yes.
Okay.
Just for continuity.
Okay. And then in terms of if anyone is looking to focus on fee waivers only available to individuals versus entities, the language could be added at the end in a way that mimics the state court rule for similar for a similar provision. The state court rule, if I were to paraphrase it now into this ordinance, if that's what is being suggested here, is you could say and further provided at the end, after the word hearing at the end of it, and further provided that only an individual is eligible for the waiver of fines, fees, or costs under this provision. A respondent who is a private or public organization is not eligible for a waiver of fines, fees, and costs unless an applicable ordinance or statute authorizes such a waiver. And that's just me translating the Michigan Core Rule 2.002 A1 to the end of this ordinance. And if that's the desire, anyone in this body can make a motion to amend that with that language.
That sounds good to me. Is that, I would like to motion to do that.
Moved and support. However, Joe, do you know what it is?
I will need the wording
Okay.
from the city attorney.
I'll, if it's approved, I'll type it really fast and send it
Okay.
by email to her.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem, I second.
Thank you, Mayor. So in a case that somebody comes before the Hearings Bureau and they have to provide a preponderance of evidence that they can't pay the fee, what does that look like compared to clear and convincing? To me, it's just like you're providing documentation that you can't do that, but how much, I mean,
Well,
to me, it's kind of like a gray area, and it's like for an individual, it's going to be the same documentation no matter which standard you're.
Sure, I understand that. So, the court system, there's actually a form that the respondent or defendant, as the case may be, would fill out. I suppose that could be translated into something, but for use by the clerk's office. If someone wants to request a fee waiver or a fine or cost waiver, and it would still be just as it is in the court, up to within the limited discretion of the judge, in our case, the hearing officer, to grant that waiver. So if the judges, or if our hearing officer is satisfied that the person meets the indigency requirements established by, you could even use that court rule as a guide, which wouldn't be unreasonable.
I guess I don't understand your last statement.
Okay, so I suppose the best examples for waiver of fines and costs request would be, I don't have the money. I'm below this 125% threshold of the poverty line, or I have other financial hardships that would be created if I were required to pay these fines and costs. That would be something that the respondent would articulate to the hearing officer, and there would have to be some level of proof for that. Or another example might be that they have corrected the violation. It just seemed like perhaps the time wasn't sufficient enough to correct the violation because of the turnaround of availability of contractors, what have you. And the hearing officer may reduce the fines and costs perhaps on that basis if that satisfies the hearing officer. So it's not just indigency that potentially meet this threshold. But if they're going to focus on a standard for who is indigent, unable to pay, that court rule could be used as a good guide by the hearing officer to say, okay, I'm going to apply this standard, and applying this standard fines and costs. There's also a separate provision in there that has kind of a first-time offender program for homeowners that occupy their residence. So the fine could be waived automatically by the hearing officer if the city attorney or or in an informal setting, the ordinance officer says this is a first-time offender, the problem's been corrected or can be corrected within a reasonable time not to exceed 30 days. It's the other piece of that section.
Right.
So it's trying to be a little remedial, but it's also trying to be fiscally responsible too.
But I guess my question is, in providing that proof, the difference in these two standards doesn't really, since it's not being applied to entities, right?
Right.
It's only private ownership. you know, in the case of indigents, they would have to provide the same information with either standard, right? They're some proof of income and that's it. In the case of, you know, I guess in the other case, I thought there was another section in here that you could not, waive fees if you, I thought I specifically stipulated that you couldn't waive fees if, based on the argument that it just took them longer. Right, so there's a clause in there that not to exceed that 30 days. If they come in at 33 days, then I thought that excluded them from the
Sure.
fee waiver, right? So there's.
That's a very common excuse offered. And as it stands right now, that is very often why a fee waiver is given, but without any real articulation in the record to that
Got it.
effect.
I'm just trying to figure out what a person who differently with these two things, right? Seems like they're going to come in with the same information either way, right?
Right, it's just, you know, the standard that's applied by the hearing officer, a preponderance of the evidence. I believe you more than I disbelieve you. Clear and convincing evidence, you know, is actually almost, it's almost to the standard. It's very hard to describe that standard, but it's almost to that standard beyond a reasonable doubt. So it is a higher burden naturally. So to the point of consistency, and to your point, there really isn't too much difference when you're demonstrating indigency and ability to pay.
Right.
But, you know, to Councilmember Fellow's point, you know, the change would be reasonable under the circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions on the amendment on the floor? All right, seeing none, Clerk Bridger, please call the roll.
Okay, this is on the amendment.
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are on the amended resolution. Thank you. And then Attorney Barker, you're gonna send that language to Clerk Boudreaux. Thanks. Oh,
The preponderance.
okay.
I'll give you the rest.
Okay, thank you. For Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm trying to find it in here, but most of the you know, the fines and jail time are set at 90 days. And I saw someplace in here that there was one section where it had 93 days, not more than 93 days. Whereas every police else, it's not more than 90 days for that offense. And I'm like, I'm kind of puzzled as to if that was a typo or if that was actual.
No,
difference.
it might be something from the original ordinance versus the amended. Okay.
Page 4 at the top of page.
I have to scroll to that.
Oh, yeah. The second or subsequent violation.
So that mirrors the state statute, I think, is it up until, I don't know, about a dozen or more years ago, cities could not impose a criminal penalty exceeding 90 days. If there is a corresponding state statute to the local ordinance, however, that law was the City Act and Townships, zoning and all those other acts were amended to allow it to add those extra 3 days to be consistent with it. So if you want to make it uniform at 90 days, that's probably easier.
I was just curious and I'm still somewhat baffled by the rationale for 90 versus 93. You know, is it a weekend? What, you know?
We all are.
Okay. No, that's the only question I had.
Any further comments or questions on the amended resolution? Or
Thank you to the attorney for providing all that information. So can make the amendment.
seeing none, Clerk.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, was there an amendment to make it uniform to 90 days?
No,
Okay.
no.
I was just curious as if that was a typo or if it's
It potentially might have been, but
If it's state,
We were saying like, 30, 31 days, somebody did the math and was like, oh, up to 93 because some months have 31 days, 3 months of 31 days. That just sounds logical. It's mathematical, but
you break the law in certain times of the year.
yeah, you get more days.
3 days.
Yeah, I don't know. Clerk Joe, please call. the roll.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes,
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
The amended ordinance passes.
thank you. All right, Councilmember King, you have our next resolution 056.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following residents be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti boards and commissions as indicated below. Raven K, Human Relations Commission, with a term expiring 7/1/28, and Elizabeth Warren, Ypsi Downtown Development Authority, with her term expiring on July 1st, 29. I so move.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember King, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. Alrighty. So in what we've been doing is having the folks who put forward the nominations have an opportunity to give any remarks.
I did, re-put Raven back for HRC for several reasons. One, we recently lost two. Soon we will lose a third person for HRC. I think her application was very strong. When we had a group for unarmed response, Raven was very committed to that process. Reading her application, she said she has made Ypsilanti her home a few years ago. She has worked in the community for over 7 years, and I just support her application overall for HRC.
You, any other comments on this nomination?
I'm just adding my support to the nomination as well. Longtime community advocate and works in several organizations that support the city here. So it's a good addition.
Okay, and then Elizabeth Warren, I brought that name forward. She is the executive director at the Riverside Arts Center. Not only does she work there, but she lives in Ypsilanti, has been here for almost 20 years. And when her name came forward to the DDA, folks at the table were very excited about the opportunity to work with Liz. Liz is very committed to the work, the community, and working collaboratively to move downtown forward. And again, she represents, the arts community, which I think is important to have a voice there for arts and culture at the table, especially as the DDA has gotten involved in more community-focused events that include the business districts. And she has extensive experience in the nonprofit sector overall. And so I think that Liz will be a strong participant with the DDA and also bring a youth-focused lens because the RAC does a lot of work with young people. Comments, questions? Anything? All right, seeing none, Clerk Joe, please call the roll.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Simmons, you have our next resolution. 057.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following youth resident be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti boards and commissions as a youth member as indicated below. Isabella Coughlin for the Sustainability Commission, and I so move.
Support.
Simmons, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcox. Councilmember Fellows. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I was able to meet with Isabella Coughlin a couple days ago, and really lovely person who, we don't have so few and far between applicants for a youth seat. So it was just exciting to have someone be interested in it. And Isabella demonstrates like a lot of relevant, interest and participation already. She is the vice president of the Key Club, which is the biggest organization in her school. She's on the forensics debate team that is very well performing in Michigan. Part of the soccer club and varsity team, and she's lived here her entire life, but because of school of choice, she actually goes to Salem High School in Plymouth Canton, and so she's interested in becoming more involved in her community here. And so, yeah, I think it would be a great learning experience. And I did check in about her needs. She is interested in having a mentor on the Sustainability Commission, so I did talk to Councilmember Simmons about that to see who might be a good fit. But seems to have other needs met as far as like she'll be able to get here on the days, no problem. And she couldn't come here to introduce herself because she has soccer tonight. So
Yeah, I was the other supporter. I know Isabel was trying to figure out what would be the best fit for her to get involved in the community. I was really excited that, she was interested in sustainability, especially how she described the developing world itself. And so just excited that we, are having young folks who are interested to serve. And so I wholeheartedly support this appointment. Any comments or,
I just
Joe.
wanted to let you know that I talked to her as well. She was adorable and said that soccer would not interfere with her attending the meeting. And we only email all of the information to any commissioner that's appointed. However, we are creating a physical packet for Isabel. The clerk's office believes that as a youth member, they do need a little more guidance and a little more help, and an actual, packet folder with her name on it will be given to her when she comes in for health.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, if there are no further comments or questions, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Phelps,
yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Welcome, Isabella, if you watch the meeting at any point. Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, you have 058.
Resolution 2025-058, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the superstructure replacement of Cross Bridge is programmed for construction year 2026 in the current 3-year TIP, and whereas the design engineering services will be expended from the Major Street Fund, and whereas OHM has submitted a proposal for engineering services for the final design of this project, which includes materials testing, SHPO applications, superstructure replacement design, roadway approach design, utility coordination, maintenance of traffic detour planning, and detailed engineering design at an estimated cost of $295,000. And now therefore be it resolved that the city council approves the proposal submitted by OHM for design engineering services to comply with regulations and directives mandated for the superstructure replacement of the Cross Street Bridge. And be it further resolved that the mayor and city clerk are authorized to sign this contract subject to approval by the city attorney, and any change orders may be approved by the city manager to facilitate completion of this work. And I so move.
Support. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, supported by Councilmember Simmons. I'll go with it. Your voice is closest to mine. To me. Good evening, Bonnie.
Good evening. Mayor Pro Tem took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
Questions for Director Wessler? Councilmember Simmons?
So my question might be a little annoying, but but I think it's a general question just in terms of thinking about just like our general contracts and like how do we know that we keep them competitive when we kind of use the same contractor for all of our work.
We have an overarching general services contract with OHM that was bid out in Lang's time, I thought. But then,
2015.
yeah, that sounds right. So are we due for another one? Probably. Do you have the bandwidth for it? Not really.
What would that look like in terms of having the bandwidth and like what kind of goes into that process?
Probably have another entire FTE and DPW.
And then just like, so, and then in order to then vet other potential companies or to put out like a bid for you said we have a
General services contract.
general services contract. And so usually, so that's just more work to kind of draw up in terms of the range of projects that we might have.
Generally, what that means is, to a certain extent, and to Rachel's great detriment, I can treat her like one of my employees. I can say, hey, Rachel, can you do me up a proposal really quick to do a sidewalk in Prospect Park? And she has that to me generally by the end of the week and says it'll be, what is it, 14,400 for that one. And that includes, you know, services that OHM has available, like the topo survey, the design engineering, fun stuff like that. And the rate is not unreasonable. And what I've heard from other communities, every community does engineering a little bit differently. It is not something I've had a huge amount of time to look into, but it would take a very large chunk of my my time in order to research to vet. We'd probably end up having to bring in another engineer or an engineering company to help us review the bids. It would be a significant production.
Councilmember Simmons, do you have more questions? Okay. Further questions from Councilmember?
Can I
Simmons?
just follow up? One quick follow up to what Councilmember Simmons said. How often in the city of Ypsilanti have we redid it? Like you said, we could be due for another one, but we don't have the bandwidth. How often in the past have we done that?
I think prior to 2015, the last time I remember doing the contract or seeing that the contract had been done was like 2002.
Okay,
So it's been a minute.
thank you.
Was it with a different company?
No, it was with OHM. One of the benefits of OHM is that they do have a long institutional knowledge. And it's kind of like having an employee that's been around for 20 years.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I know there's a lot of engineering firms, but how many engineering firms in this area would be able to bid on this?
It depends what scope we choose to proceed with. Every community does it a little bit differently.
Mhm.
So Saline, for instance, they have a city engineer on staff. That engineer does a lot of their bid documents, a lot of their solicitations and bids for services, a lot of their scoping, fun stuff like that, that I currently saddle OHM with. That city engineer does a whole lot of stuff in-house that currently we have to do out-house. We could choose to bring that function in-house and hire our own city engineer. We could, this is very far off the topic of the bridge here, I'm sorry. But, and then they have a separate service that does their traffic studies. They have a separate service that does their architectural stuff. They have a separate that does this and that and the other thing. One of the great things about OHM is I can call and ask them the most random stuff. Like today I asked them about, hey, can you do a permit inspection for us? And they generally have somebody who can do that. OHM also does site plan review for engineering concept. They do on-site inspections for site development. They do our project management for roads and what have you. So they have a very deep bench, which is very useful to us. And as far as other firms that can do this, off the top of my head, I can think of maybe 2 or 3.
Kind of what I thought in terms of the expertise in municipal.
Other comments or questions from council? Member Fellows?
Yeah, I was looking at the roadway approach work, and the proposal for, it says will taper to transition the existing road and sidewalk, and that there be 2 11-foot lanes, 2-foot shoulders, and 10-foot sidewalks on both sides of the road. Is that any different than what it is right now?
Yes. Right now, the sidewalks are quite a bit less wide. I want to say they're maybe 8 feet wide at the most.
Yeah.
Less once you remove the crumbling curb from the equation. And the travel lanes are quite a bit wider. So I think overall, the profile of the new superstructure is 2 feet less than the existing one.
So even the superstructure will be a little bit.
It's wide.
Oh, okay.
So the sidewalks are going to be wider, the
Mhm.
travel lanes are going to be narrower.
Well, that all sounds like good in the right direction. Yeah, it would be great to have a wider sidewalk because it sometimes it's awkward walking down there two-way. But also a lot of times I've taken my bike on the sidewalk because the roads are just not in good condition or traffic. So I'm also curious about leaving space for a bike lane in this.
So we kind of discussed this a little bit with Prospect. There's no bike lane really before or after it, so we didn't really provide for a bike lane there.
Mhm.
The grand plan and the overall scheme of things is because the border-to-border trail goes in that area and currently under the cross street bridge, the border-to-border trail would pick up on either side of the bridge. So if somebody wanted to join the border-to-border trail southbound from Depot Town, they would go across the bridge and then down. If somebody wanted to pop up into Depot Town from the border-to-border trail going northbound, they'd be able to do the reverse. So this would be as much a functional link between that north-south border-to-border trail as it would be for the transportation, but it does not preclude having bike lanes on either side or other bike facilities such as water paths on either side.
Mhm.
Is that?
So yeah, we're thinking about the larger border-to-border chain, and also it doesn't preclude, we can still have space for bike lanes. So I think I would just advocate for anytime we're doing road infrastructure improvements that we also do some non-motorized component. That's just my preference for like all of our projects.
We
So
try to do that.
yeah, if in the design it could just be like, here's the options, and one of them is, bike lane or the space for
We
bike
did that a
lanes.
little bit with the feasibility study, which was
Okay.
the phase prior to this. In order to put bike lanes and those 10-foot wide sidewalks, which is what we want for the shared use path linkages, then the bridge becomes wider and then affects the piers. Since we're reusing the existing piers, it becomes a more challenging equation to add width to the overall superstructure.
Is it going to be a different cost as far as look this part of this proposed study, as far as looking at, option A, option B?
This one
Question.
presumes that we have decided on option A,
I see.
figurative option.
2 feet median is probably not enough for like painting a bike lane.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, I would just stay strong. I mean, because I commute to work sometimes, so I don't take the border to border. I take cross street, So I just will advocate for in this design proposal at least some footnotes of like what it would be if there were, some splitting the difference between the sidewalk and the bike lane and all these things.
Further questions or comments for Bonnie, Mayor Pro Tem?
I found the wetlands and endangered species section curious between these two proposals, this one and the following one. Like there's language in the second one about mussel surveys, but in the second one, but not in this one. And if we have to delineate wetlands in the project area, which I'm racking my brain trying to figure out where those wetlands are, then how is it not going to affect mussel? Because I know the rationale is you're not doing anything to the substructure,
Right.
right? So it's not in the river, but if you're
We
going
have to show
affect
that
the
we're not in the river.
wetlands, I would, by the same extension,
We have to show that we're not in the river, so we have to delineate where the river is, and thus by extension, the wetlands.
okay. Yeah, I'm still, it's fine.
Further comments or questions for Bonnie? All right, seeing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so much. Councilmember McLean, you have 059.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the reconstruction of Harriet is programmed for construction year 2026 in the current 3-year TIP, and whereas the design engineering services will be expended from the Major Streets Fund, and whereas OHM has submitted a proposal for engineering services for the final design of this project, which includes Transportation Alternatives Program grant coordination, SHPO application assistance, and detailed engineering design at an estimated cost of $112,400. And now therefore be it resolved that the city council approves the proposal submitted by OHM for design engineering services to comply with regulations and directives mandated for the reconstruction of Harriet. And be it further resolved that the mayor and city clerk are authorized to sign this contract, subject to approval by the city attorney, and any change orders may be approved by the city manager to facilitate completion of this work. I so move.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember McLean, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. Hello again, Bonnie.
Why, hello. Again, Councilmember McLean took the words right out of my mouth. So do you have any questions?
Questions from council, comments? Councilmember Fellows?
I had emailed you earlier about this, and you were explaining that this is like the short section of the whole Harriet project. So does that mean that these are two separate projects? Okay. And the other one is already in its final stages, like
Be
it's
going out to bid very shortly.
okay. And with that final bid and design, it doesn't include a non-motorized component, right?
It includes improved sidewalks, improved crosswalks, bump outs. We're doing some signal modifications, I believe, not extensive ones. But that's primarily a reconstruct. Yucca is going to be coming in beforehand to do water mains. So there is no additional bike lanes.
Hmm. So yeah, if there was something like that in this one, it would just be there was bike lanes here, not in the other section. Okay, well, I'm just gonna continue advocating for bike lanes for all future road projects, and also, side widening and things like that too. But this doesn't seem like it will make sense here if it's not gonna be on the other side of Harriet.
Mayor Pro Tem?
If I may, the non-motorized advisory committee has been working for a number of years on neighborhood connectors. And the route through Heritage Park is certainly not on. That's a very heavily traveled road, and it goes deeper into the neighborhood. So there are things at work to get folks on bike through the neighborhood connectors, and I believe it goes down First Avenue once it gets out of there. So
The aim is to make Harriet a little bit more of a low-stress street so that it is more bikeable without having the real estate added to the right-of-way that it would need in order to have proper bike lanes on both sides. So,
Well, wasn't there this is the street that has the big shoulders for parking though, right?
so the vast majority of Harriet Street is 33 feet wide. That is wide enough for two 11-foot travel lanes, which is as small as we can go, as well as a substantial parking lane or two bike lanes. So you'd be giving up the parking, which is pretty heavily used largely by the Park Ridge Community Center on the one side, especially for events and for the park and the park events. And then on the other side, the parking can be used more heavily, especially if it's improved and protected and that area narrowed down a little bit towards the Hamilton end. And that would be pretty heavily used by the Hope Clinic side of things because they've been advocating for more parking for themselves and paving over that lot in between the Hope Clinic and Farm Stand for probably a decade now. So there's significant demand for parking there. When we've held community meetings in Heritage Park and the Park Ridge Park neighborhoods in the past, the last one was a couple of years ago in association with the CDBG funding for the area. We got a lot of feedback requesting traffic calming, specifically south of Park Ridge Park and those neighborhoods there, but also on Harriet, on First, and on Second, and even on Burton Court a little bit. we asked if bike lanes would be something that the neighborhood was interested in, either as a traffic calming method or as, you know, for actual transport. And the response was pretty negative to that. So that's one of the other reasons why we're not pursuing bike lanes in this area.
Oh, there's something. Okay. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, Clerk Bujold, please call the roll.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you so much. All right, we're at our first discussion of two for this evening. The first about the Water Street RFP development and public participation. City manager? Or
I believe this was added by, Councilmembers Fellows and Simmons. Katie's here to provide an update regarding this.
I'll turn it over to one of you, both of you.
Did he say an update?
From Katie, yeah.
Oh. Hi, Katie.
Dang it.
Goody.
So what I put in front of each of you is our community involvement sessions that'll be coming up in April and May. So we'll be doing a history session and we'll have some panelists. So we've invited 3 different folks. Somebody from AKT will be there because they've have a lot of history on the project. We've also invited past city manager Ed Crisno, as well as Teresa Gelati. So 3 different folks who have different sort of stages in the involvement of Water Street over the years. So I think that'll be nice. And then we'll be doing one that will specifically be on the brownfield as well as just environmental conditions as is discussion. We'll have AKT as well as myself. And there's a third. Oh, and we'll also have Nathan vote from the county on that one as well. And then we'll do a future of Water Street with Andrew and with the mayor, both speaking about kind of future vision and excitement about the Water Street property. So those are the sort of some of the community engagement sessions that we have coming up in the next little bit.
Thank you. Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to see a session on brownfield redevelopment. Yeah, this is something that I first spoke to the city manager maybe a month or 2 ago, just interest in having a bit more of a robust or a lot bit more of a robust community process than that we generally have had in the past. And, you know, in that conversation, city manager indicated, well, there's time because we are not yet to the stage of, we don't have a contract with the developer at this time. And I know we do have this consulting firm to do some of the work, but I do not think this is enough. I think because of, this being our, what is often considered like our last real like major piece of land along adjacent to downtown on the riverfront, all of this. And because it was, underwritten by residents in Ypsilanti, that residents in Ypsilanti, put good faith effort into getting the city out from under the situation financially. I do think that it needs to be a good faith effort in figuring out what the community wants as far as the development goes, especially with such a large piece. If we're going to stick to the plan of one developer for the whole thing. So I am bringing this to discuss like potentially doing either a citizen committee to develop RFP, at least provide the suggestions for what is wanted, that would, meet for X number of times and would also have, same kind of public input process. and would pull from several different constituencies in the city because it affects the entire city, to actually learn what we want in an RFP instead of just like I think historically it's been whoever's the city manager and the econ developer at the time just kind of decides. And so I would like to move away from that and start getting more community input into this process.
Thank you. Remember, King, did you have anything to add?
No, I know we talked about it in the past. The only thing I would add is that I do think we need to really have a lot of public engagement for Water Street because this has been, around for many, many years, and we hear a lot from the public in our meetings, and I think maybe individually about Water Street. And they want to know what is the plan and how can they participate and have a say in what will be there.
Thank you. Councilmember Simmons?
Yes, thank you. I'll definitely share out these dates. But they definitely seem like they're more kind of giving information to community as opposed to the other way of community determining. And then I will say the one that feels the most like it might be that falls on May Day, which is a major workers' rights day. There's going to be events. There's always things here in Ypsilanti around May Day, given our population. So I see that as it's a little unfortunate that that's overlapped. And especially with that one being more city sitting. But that one feels like that's the one where would be likely the most kind of general community engagement. So I think that it makes sense that we're going to need more of those, especially because of that. Especially because of that overlap.
Thank you. I'll just add that my impression when I was approached about these dates was that this was just the beginning and this was not all that was going to be done. So I'm hopeful that was, there are plans for additional meetings in community.
Yes, I do believe that we are planning more as we develop the RFQ to get more citizen input. But if council wishes to have a citizen committee, it would be better to make that determination sooner rather than later.
So I guess a question I would have on that is just thinking about, I guess, what that would entail, like whether it's that we need to have a resolution to say we want to have a resident committee, how much detail do we need to have within that? Whether we look at connecting it with a commission or things like that.
Council would, you would have to vote as a body to determine what you would like to do.
Okay, so I guess I'm just asking, I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear about what we have to put forward. So is it just that we do a resolution to say we want to have a resident committee? How much detail when, in the past when these have been created, how much of that was kind of put forward in order to get things kicked off? I know, the last one that I participated in, we had something that came to us, but then we as a body also had some conversations around some of the details. So I just want to know what we would need to do so that we do it in a way that makes sense with our consultants.
Yeah, I think that the more that we provide in terms of what we would want, the better. Especially if the city manager is saying that this would need to happen sooner than later, the more we can bring forward maybe in a resolution and have folks be able to see it and then come either with questions or ways that we want to tweak it. And then I do think there is the importance of allowing then whoever we appoint to that to also have some say in what they'll be working on or bringing forward. But I think as much as we can bring forward, this is a council-led. It's not right now, it's not official, but would be a council-led initiative. That would be best.
And this is still with our Carlisle Wortman contract?
I believe so, yeah.
It is, yes.
Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, I brought this mostly as a discussion today to kind of solicit what people were interested in as far if there was interest in this sort of thing and then what we would want to put as like the goals of a committee and so forth. And then I thought the idea would be like we could bring a resolution at the next meeting. And also solicit input from staff as well. And one thing I wanted to bring up is I did talk to Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Will Coxon about this, and we even had discussion of like, oh, how could we integrate this with the folks that are doing the process right now, as far as like maybe they'll even do some staffing on a citizen committee, because that has happened before in prior citizen committees. Just some ideas. Yeah, so I guess it's more just like soliciting ideas for what this could look like and to bring forward to a resolution, and then, tweak it when that happens.
I did have a question about timeline, before we get into committees and what they're assigned to do. So we've got these meetings coming up in the next month. We've got, the land being cleared for, the remediation, the timeline for the remediation, and then the engagement. We're spending this year getting the remediation done. And courting developers, however you want to put that. So this is going to be happening through the summer. With the RFP, what's the projected RFP date?
We don't yet have one because we're doing this community engagement. So like this is the beginning of the community engagement. And so these 3 sessions, I'm looking at the contract now, like we have 3 sessions. That's the charrette that and each of them will have some community engagement. Each of them will have an opportunity for people to provide input on each session and ask questions and get more information, as well as to provide information back to us about the site. And then it also says up to 6 focus groups is also in the contract too. So there's gonna be more beyond these 3 days, these 3. It's not just this. And I think that we also had some discussions about an electronic option as well, because that was important. We wanted to make sure we provided different pieces of feedback as well for folks. So just wanted to make sure I added those pieces of information as well.
So with the 6,
Oh, and so I imagine, I apologize. I imagine that the RFP will come out of all of that community engagement. So, we're not so much courting developers right now. We really are not. Like, I mean, there's been a few folks who have approached us and we've taken those meetings and provided information, but really all we've done at this point for developers is said, come to the community engagement sessions, right? Like, come and hear what the community is talking about, hear what we're interested in, and that kind of thing. So those are the only conversations that have taken place thus far as well. So I think at that point is probably what we're talking about. I you know what I'm saying? If we wanted to develop something, that would make sense to me, at least, that it would all kind of be following some of that community engagement to develop some sort of a committee, because I think that's when we would be looking at an RFP. I don't anticipate it happening before that point.
and like Mayor Pro Tem said, through the summer, but I feel, isn't this supposed to go beyond the summer? Like this time frame that we're in with the clearing, the remediation, the engagement process?
I think that will all depend on funding to some extent, right? So the grant that we're working under with the MEDC will expire in December of this year. I imagine we'll probably spend it by the end of the summer. The MEDC funds is my guess. We just recently got from the DCC, the Downriver Conference, from the Brownfield, some additional funding. So that testing that we had earmarked, some of the HUD funding that we're still waiting to hear back from or hear back on, or at least get a signed contract is the right way to say that. So hopefully we'll still be able to do that testing so that the project continues to move forward, whether we get the HUD funding or not. And then we'll have a sense whether or not we need to do additional excavation from there. And then, so then at that point, we'll have some decisions to make about whether or not we continue to do remediation, or if the site is as clean as the city can get it at this point, and we go out for developers.
I would say if council would like to create a committee, maybe have it following the focus groups, and we'll just have to extend the contract with Carlisle Wortman to assist in that. But I think those meetings prior to that would give Carlisle Wortman a good framework to maybe bring a draft, and then the citizen committee could work from that draft.
One of the things I was just thinking about is that some of those focus group sessions or times could actually be with the committee. So I was thinking that actually those folks in that space and that doing that facilitation in that space, when the folks in the committee bringing these other voices and things like that, so that it could actually fit within what that contract is. So I think that there's some different things that we could think about in terms of that. My question on the contract is whether what that, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look at it. It was like years ago, it feels like now. It might have literally been a couple of years ago.
I think it was last
It was
year,
last year.
but yeah, it
Summer.
feels like it was a long.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was like June.
Okay. So, but in terms of like, what are the, like is there a time for when that's supposed to be done, or is it just like as these things are finished?
a time that what will be done?
Oh, the contract with Carlisle Wortman, that time bound in some way?
I think it was more content and less time. bound.
Yeah.
It was based on the deliverables.
Yeah.
They're coordinating between city staff and the and doing communication, and they're also helping us like for out of those community engagement develop a design.
Yeah.
Right. And then also with that RFP, I believe, as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I kind of remember, that there was like all these different pieces.
Yeah, they'll have a detailed
then-
report and recommendation.
Yeah, and I remember that there was the things of what happens if we want more things and things like that. So I would rather look at within the, like, what we could do also within the parameters of that, but with an extension of recognizing that that I do believe that like people internal to the city are going to be able to do a different level of engagement and outreach than a consulting company will be able to do. So anyway, just bring that forward for folks to think about too.
Every time I saw your hand go up and then down, I don't know if you had something.
No, I guess I was thinking about the deliverables and question. I mean, this isn't. It's part of a bigger discussion, but do they provide engineering services during the remediation? So they get to the planning and all that kind of stuff, and they see that. But just another question about the contract, whether they, like in the proposals we just talked about, they go up to the point of construction, but do they do oversight of the construction?
No, there's nothing during.
So once we get the remediation, get to the point of an RFP for a developer, then that's pretty much the end of their deliverables.
There's some work, I believe, working with development and application of developers.
Yeah, they would review all the RFQs that are submitted and then would provide a recommendation. Okay.
They'll interview the selected firms, that sort of thing. They're gonna help with each step of that.
Further discussion?
I think one thing that staff will do is in terms of that citizen group, being the focus group, maybe get the opinion of the contractor to see if what that could look like. And then we can report that back to council.
So I guess I have a question for my colleagues in terms of the makeup of the proposed committee. I look at this like any board, be looking for specific expertise in terms of dealing with developers. I guess I'm curious to hear what kinds of folks you expect to or are looking to have on the committee?
So, I mean, I'm sure that there's probably a range, my personal piece would be, I'd be interested in folks who are connected in community and so would be trusted messengers and trusted people in different parts of the city, who then would be people who can, connect with folks. People would come to things that they help to host because they trust them in that space. So I would like, yes, there's people who have like real estate or whatever profession, professional experience. But to me, if we're thinking about how do we make sure that we're getting the most voices from the community and also trying to understand what things that people really want to see, I would definitely want folks who have standing in community, and connections and skill sets in that. I would want people who are able to, oh, people who are, are able to do um, some, um, having skills. I'm not, these aren't necessarily the right words, but I'm gonna say like synthesizing, like being able to hear, which I think, the consultants can definitely help with this in terms of hearing a lot of things that people are wanting and then being able to turn it around into something that can be doable and specific. Um, I would like to have a mix of people who have been in the city um, for a long time, as well as newer residents. I think it would be good to have a mix of folks. I think it would be good to have a mix of, I think it would be good to have some people, in the business community, um, included, especially as we think about this area as an extension and extending our downtown space. Um, and Yeah, I could probably think of more. I also am thinking about the other thing is obviously this isn't happening in a vacuum. Like obviously there's been a lot of conversations, there's been a lot of engagement about it. And so I would even look at some of those things that have come out of there and identify some of the like groups or interests that have come out of some of those to also think about where there might be skills to actually further develop or think about some of the ideas that people have put forward in terms of what some of that might look like.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying also to share my thoughts on who might be on that committee. I don't know if Councilwoman Simmons mentioned specifically, but while I would want certainly the vast majority to be residents of the city, I wouldn't want to preclude having a small number that bring in some kind of expertise in these kinds of sites that might come from, say, ideally somewhere at least within Washtenaw County or maybe Southeast Michigan. So I don't know how people feel about the idea of having a few people on that committee with that kind of perspective.
Councilmember Charles, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I have less, I think that council can decide who we want on the committee. I'm glad that there's interested in it. I wanted to say that I was thinking of it in scope too, because, if, it's been a long time, lots of time has passed and Water Street has not been developed. So I can imagine that it still might not be developed anytime in the next year or so. I also had thought about, the planning commission is considering doing a master plan update. And so, if that does happen, a group like this could also inform a master plan update with the potential subsection of like master plan for Water Street itself. So that's just like another idea of kind of like depending on the scope and the time scale. But I would be interested in taking this idea and coordinating with either the city manager or somebody else that to see who or like maybe have a meeting with the contractor to see how we could integrate these things, and then bring like some sort of proposal to the next meeting that we can then flesh out more if that seems appropriate.
Yeah, Katie or myself can reach out to Carlisle Wortman and see if we can put something together with the suggestions that council has provided thus far, and we can turn that around and bring it to the 15th.
Councilmember McLean? You're fine. No, no.
Just one point of clarification. I think the city manager talking to the contractor about using this proposed committee as the group that might be part of the focus group. And
Yeah, that was Councilmember Simmons's idea. I referenced bringing it to the contractors in order to give us their opinion on that. But I'm assuming that they've worked in situations like this before, so just kind of see where their head's at and how they think this would be the most effective.
yeah, I would be happy to have them work with this committee, certainly, but I would not want them to be the committee to be the only focus group. So I'm not sure if you were saying that. I just wanted to be,
I was I thought that was what was being referenced. It's whatever council would like to do.
yes,
So
that's my own preference is that they might well make a focus group or two focus groups, but that other focus groups would also be mixed.
So I guess the other thing is to me, like just so like understanding like the terminology, right? What a focus group is, all these things is to me, it's like the number of engagements and touch points. So whether they call it a focus group or another kind of engagement with community, right? So there might be different things. It sounds like if these like that these ones are gonna have things where people are, coming in. So to me, I guess one of the things would be to determine, like, so if you're saying you didn't want different focus groups, like what would that be? Or like what would that entail? How would that be different? How would you pull from that would get better information than when we get in general? Why would we need them to do a focus group when if the resident committee is doing engagements with folks? Because usually focus groups are kind of like you get a room, you got like, you know, maybe 6 to like 8 people. And you're like, you're just asking questions, and usually it's to get representation of different folks to then talk about different things. So to me, I just want to name it to say like I'm not so concerned about like the naming of like calling it a certain thing. I'm more interested in the depth and breadth of the engagement and making sure that we are getting the voices of the people, and we might be able to actually have broader engagement than what you have with the focus group, because like I said, those tend to be pretty small, obviously very controlled, and it's usually like going through like a list, and it's usually much like one way, so it's usually just like the folks running it ask questions, the people give an answer, and then it's just like a collecting of input as opposed to not necessarily being more interactive or like building off of it, different things that I think, oh, excuse me, can happen in some different kind of setup. So I think, especially if we're having the conversation with them, I think it would be to figure out, yeah, like what role would this play and how it would be different, or how it would be additive, or, things like that. Because when we first did this conversation, that was outside of this conversation of like this different kind of resident committee engagement. So I just think we want to think about it. I wouldn't want to just say focus group for focus group's sake. I would want it to be like purposeful.
Oh, yeah, and I think for me, I agree with that 100%. And maybe when I hear focus groups, my brain went to, interactive sessions, not the contractors like asking the questions they want to ask, but allowing folks to have input. So I would love to just maybe in this, when you reach out to them, to find out what does that mean? Like, what does focus groups mean for them, what they plan to do, and then how those things can be integrated together, because I don't think 6 focus groups would be effective in terms of gathering information from the constituency, right? Like,
Mhm.
so
Usually they call those like charrette,
Tourette's or
which is
like-
what you were saying that these.
Right.
you
So
were
I think
having-
that's my understanding of what these is that charrette. And I think that there also is description in the contract about up to 6 focus groups, including a potential electronic version of that as well. And so I think that there's lots of things in this contract that aren't terribly defined. And so I think that there's just more, but now that I'm hearing what you guys are saying, I think that that's helpful to go back to them and
Cause I do remember in the contract, I'm sorry, I think it was like the possibilities.
Yeah,
were, like you
there's
could
a
have
lot of that kind of,
combinations
there's a lot of
things,
that
yeah.
kind of word.
So it
wording.
didn't necessarily mean like 6 focus groups. It could
Right.
be like 3 focus groups and 3 short. It was like a,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like a la carte situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
What we
need
need
to
based on what they
clarify
see. Okay.
some of that now at this stage in the game.
Gotcha. Oh, Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that my thought is kind of like taking the community benefits ordinance as a template. The spirit is mostly just to do that instead of on the back end and the front end. So it actually informs what we're soliciting from developers. So maybe similar type of like we have a community meeting to explain what it is, what we're looking for, solicit interest, and then people apply, and then we decide who's on it. And there's, X amount of sessions, but yeah, hopefully it's not like a lot of work to develop this idea because we do have the community benefits ordinance, so we can reference that a little bit to build out something similar.
Any additional comments on this discussion? Mayor Pro Tem?
We've had multiple sessions in council since I've been here. We had a nice about Water Street, and we had a nice summation of the history from Joe at one point prior to J29 and Renovare putting forth, well, loosely calling them proposals. And it seems like, during those discussions, we get the same thing. It's like a boilerplate model of development, and then every one of them had businesses along Michigan Avenue and this gradient of housing going back to the river and things like that. And not very imaginative. And mixed use is mixed use, but it's just like, I don't know how that first got into the mindset that that's what's going to happen. But I'm looking forward to having more engagement to see if that is still something we want to be doing, and what people envision. So, my liaison update for SEMCOG, I went and that General Assembly meeting was all about developments, and different communities went about it in different ways. And kind of looking at those, and some of those developments were exactly Water Street. They didn't look any different than the proposals we'd seen. And so, the developer's mindset, of this is what people want, and this what, and then seeing the variations of the various proposals that were presented at SEMCOG. There's variations on a theme, but what does that variation look like for our community versus those communities? So I'm looking forward to this process and getting that and seeing how the input has changed. And if we wind up with the same set of inputs, then we have to think about that. And and at some point, I imagine there will be different ratios of affordable housing, versus others and things like that. But fundamentally, well, what are we going to do with this land? Is it housing? Is it something completely different that we haven't seen? So I'm kind of looking forward to this.
Thank you. Anything further? All right, so we'll move on to our discussion regarding the process for council members to utilize or rent city facilities. Thank you, Katie. I need to go too. You beat me. All right. Councilmember Simmons.
Yes, thank you. So the thing I'll say up right quick is actually, so when I saw in our packet, we had the previous process, And of course, like, I was like, I never knew about it. And it said in there like, oh, it will be shared with city members. And yeah, so that had never happened. And I don't know quite kind of why or what that gap was. But looking at the process or the form, to me, that seemed like sufficient to use. So instead of kind of trying to create a new process, I would be happy for us to just use the process that had been in place for um, reserving space. And yeah, so I was like, that made it a lot simpler actually seeing that we already had a process in place that was created before I was on council.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Fellows.
Yeah, this came up because the city manager mentioned that there was this prior process to reserve public buildings for ward meetings and such. I I wasn't clear on whether this is standing or if this needs to be renewed because of the ordinance that went into place.
This would still be standing.
Okay.
So it's essentially council members would complete a form and then it would go to council for approval.
Okay. So would it,
I'm sorry.
would a next step be just like
So is it?
sharing the link?
Yeah, we'll put this together and make sure all of council gets it. And
Mhm.
then the, I mean, it would be administered by the clerk department. And then whenever council requests something, it would come before council to be approved.
Great. So then it could just be updated. I think in the form it just had like the member, each of our names and stuff.
Mhm.
So that sounds great. That would be very simple. Thank you.
If I may, I wasn't aware of this either. And this would be one of those things that I want us to codify all of council's rules of order. So that it would be one document as your rules of order. And then if something came up, you would simply change your rules of order. Another process to it or change a process that's in it.
So I'm sure you have a folder that's growing.
It's growing, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I love that it gets in, because that way it doesn't get missed,
Mhm.
because I would have certainly been using it had I known. And we could have avoided, I think, like unneeded conflict. So thank you. And then just let me know when it's ready, because I've been waiting for months to talk to my residents. So.
Absolutely, will do.
Councilmember McLean, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is a question, perhaps, thank you, Mayor, for the city attorney. If this came before the body on behalf of a single member, would that member be required or suggested that they recuse themselves?
I think that's a case-by-case analysis. If the body wanted to consider various provisions of Article 46, which is the ethics ordinance, there's, I mean, if the process is the process, it seems that if there's some allegation that the request is for some sort of personal gain, then that person probably should recuse themselves from the decision because they're the requester. But I think you have to cross that bridge when you get to a particular request. I don't think a general statement could be made on that subject. But that's where we would first look.
My question is just wording. So this current process talks about citywide events. What if, someone wants to do something just for their ward? We just assume this applies the same way? Because this is a process for citywide events is what it says. So I'm just trying to clarify.
Correct. It would still be open to
Same thing.
everyone. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's literally, this is specific to my ward, we're just assuming it because it's in Ipsy, it's open to everybody.
Right.
Okay. Just one clarification.
Thank you.
I found that people, I will say, even if I am like ward, people know I'm the ward rep or whatever, but I have found that people from other parts of the city come, and sometimes even from the township or, other elected, So I have found that other people
yeah.
come to them. That's not, I have had, really, it's only been probably one resident actually who tried to ask why somebody was there who wasn't from the ward, but that was not my question, nor most other people's, but,
And that wasn't my reason for saying it, because yes, everything we do is pretty much people show up. But I'm looking at it from our side of it. If a council member said, I want to do this is for the ward, and they put it on paper, is that different than the fact that we all obviously know folks from outside can come to events,
Mhm.
right? Like,
would you
does that
wanna-
matter?
so would you,
How
are
you
you
present the,
thinking like whether the language should be changed to say like, what, it's open to the public?
no, I'm just asking literally what this means, because I just in case, because maybe it's not any of us, but this process was in place
Mhm.
before some of us were up here. And so what if, someone was specifically like, my event is for Ward 1, even though we know people can show up, but your intention was specifically for those residents. I know that probably is getting into like semantics, but I'm just wondering, because we do have people, right? Who maybe it's one person who will say, well, why does this person have a say because they don't live here or whatever? And like, how does that work out?
Well, this, I don't believe actually was ever used.
No,
Um,
I can tell you it wasn't. It
I
was.
think it was approved and then I don't think it was ever used, which is why it kind of fell off my radar. But it's really whatever council wants it to be. Right now, it's a citywide forum. Depending on how you worded it, you could say this is a forum for the ward, whatever reps. So it doesn't necessarily indicate that it's only for ward, a certain ward. It's for everyone.
And I'm only asking that, let me be clear, not to be funny, but like in lots of these previous conversations we've had, words matter, right? And like, so there's sometimes when we're in a resolution and we're like, oh, we need to make sure it says exactly what you mean. This is not exactly what we mean. It's in essence, we all understand that, but the language does not say that. So, I'm just putting it out there. Councilmember Fellows.
I motion to amend changing citywide to public.
Thank you.
The
I can't make
2
it.
times it's on.
Support.
All right, it's been moved and supported. Moved by Councilmember Fellows, supported by Councilmember Simmons. Sorry.
And question 8 would be changed to from describe how this event would benefit the city at large. But maybe just it would be describe how this event would
Just benefit the.
benefit the public.
Public or the city?
The
period? Yeah,
public,
Public, okay. Thank you.
I'd stick with city.
City, but benefit the city. Yeah.
Mhm.
City instead of public.
Yeah.
So this is for us.
Is that a
Yeah.
is that a friendly to the amendment?
Okay with that?
Yes, accept.
Any discussion on the amendment?
So I'm amending resolution 2022-042 by changing citywide to a public event. Correct?
Mhm. Yes.
And, the number 8 in the questionnaire is changed to public as well.
No, to city.
Go to city.
The city, not
Sorry,
without
thank
the
you.
at large on it. Okay.
Got
Thank you. Thank you so much for making that motion, y'all. If there's no discussion, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yep.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, thank you. All right, and that was it. So there's nothing else if anybody has anything.
There is one more item.
No, I mean on this, because there was not a resolution on the floor for this, just discussion in terms of voting. So back to discussion. Councilmember
I
Fellows?
just have one comment. Just I think we're looking at May 8th for a Ward 3 event. So that'll probably come. Hopefully we can bring it to the next meeting.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I'll have this updated and I'll try to get it out to you tomorrow so you can submit it.
We're changing the names, right?
No, I'm
Oh,
keeping them the
so
same.
keep all the same names.
It could just be
Like the seat.
ward.
Yeah, the
by
seat.
seat,
Mhm.
yeah.
Oh, should we?
No, I'm.
No, they'll
I'll
do,
change
they
up
can do
my
that.
answer.
Yeah, that's an automatic.
Because we had to put our name in on it anyway.
Mhm.
Put it in.
Mr. Jones, yeah. All right, we'll close that discussion and move on. Councilmember Fellows, you have our final resolution.
Do we vote to approve this?
Nope,
We don't.
we already, we.
Yeah, you voted to.
we already
Oh,
gave you-
oh yeah, we just amended it. Okay, sorry. Resolution number 2025-060, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and whereas freedom for sexual assault is a basic human right, yet tens of thousands of Americans carry the trauma of sexual assault with them, and whereas sexual violence affects all people regardless of geography, race, age, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, or economic background. And whereas 1 in 4 women and 1 in 26 men have survived a rape or attempted rape, abuse can happen anywhere, at work, at home, at school, in other public places, or online. And whereas sexual assault can lead to depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other physical and emotional wounds, and whereas the Safe House Center has requested to tie teal ribbons and a placard that provides information regarding Sexual Assault Awareness Month and information on how to contact Safe House. And whereas Safe House has requested to tie ribbons on Tress, on East Cross between River and Rice, on Michigan Avenue between Huron and Hamilton, and West Cross between Summit and College Place. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and city council supports this national campaign and approves of teal ribbons being tied in the specified locations in the city April 1st to April 30th, 2025 in honor of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I so move.
Moved by Councilmember Fellows, supported by Councilmember McLean. Discussion? We've done this before. Councilmember Sin.
Just a quick question. When we do these different kind of ribbon things, who's responsible for taking them down? Because I know we still have the ones from the purple ones are still up.
The organization usually always takes them
Yeah.
down following.
Okay.
So if it wasn't taken down, just
You might have just like forgot, like
yeah,
missed.
they may have missed one. We could send out code enforcement if you want to just email me and we'll get it taken down.
I mean, I could take it. Well,
Yeah, just brought this forward because of course, support awareness, for all the reasons stated in the resolution. And I'm hopeful that council will, support this. Any further? You thinking about it?
No. I'm thinking about something
Okay.
associated with this. That's all.
Further comment or discussion? All right, seeing done, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
It's always in October.
It's always cold.
Yep. Thank you. It's always in October. All right. We are at, what?
I want to move to
Oh, yeah.
extend to 10:30.
Support.
Moved and supported, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Got a
Any
big go-kart
opposed?
going or what?
We had a conversation before the meeting. Sorry, Randy. It's Randy's birthday tomorrow and he would like to go home.
April birthday.
Yeah.
For his birthday.
Before he
Oh.
wants to go home before his birthday, basically, is all he said. All
We'll
right.
Make it.
We're close.
Yeah, you're gonna make it. Police advisory.
Fine.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend our last meeting. I will be getting updates from our commission here soon. But our next meeting is April the 24th, right here in City Hall at 7 p.m. I hope to see you all there.
Thank you. HRC?
HRC was canceled this month. Our next meeting is April the 17th at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Parks and Arts?
No report, next meeting. No report tonight.
All right. Sustainability?
Our next meeting is April 14th, although it is the month of Earth Day, so I'm sure there will be information. I'm gonna reach out to the chair just to figure out information to share with the rest of you all about what to expect for this event.
Oh, and the annual report is in the packet.
Yes.
HGC?
Next meeting is a week from tonight, April 8th.
Thanks. Planning Commission?
Planning Commission met on March 19th. Three topics were the dark sky compliant ordinance discussion. Josh gave a presentation with ordinances from Ann Arbor, Lansing, and Holland Charter Township. It's a great discussion. It looks like they will go forward with kind of melding those together. Josh will be presenting at the next meeting on that. One other issue was tenting and safe parking. And there was discussion on that. A lot of discussion. I've got a lot of notes here from this, but you can get the minutes of this meeting that are extensive on the agenda center. Josh did a great job of encapsulating those comments. And basically, the end result of this is that basically it was consensus that it wasn't within the purview of the Planning Commission to there wasn't anything they could do within the code to assist with this. There was conversation about how the city doesn't have to comply with their own codes, and certainly on public lands, they're exempt from certain things. And so I think everybody on the committee or on the commission agreed that this was outside of their purview. Some commissioners cited that the master plan cites shelters, and this person specifically said, you're going up the wrong tree, just give them housing. So they're kind of begging off on this for various reasons. So their job on that is done. The other thing is the master plan consideration. Best practices was stated to be that a complete overhaul happens every other cycle for a master plan. So in 2013, there was a complete overhaul. We updated this during the pandemic, starting 2018. That process started. And so there were various opinions on the commission as to, whether it was worth the expense to do that now. So we would be in the cycle that a complete overhaul would happen. That proposed amount, the estimate was about $50,000 process funded through the planning department. So there's still a difference of opinion on the commission, and they will take this up again. This is a timely consideration because if it is going to be a complete overhaul, we need to get moving on this as this master plan expires. So, and then I think next year, 2019 to, I think this year is when it comes up, because we did 2019 and 2020 together. So there's that. There's
Year, you think?
what's
At the
that?
end of 2025?
Yeah, every 5 years, so we need to start that. And there's one person in the public comment, and this person's family owns the BP station at 1465 Washtenaw, and they are looking to do some development work and an expansion of that. Not particularly popular with some of my constituents. But I did meet with the person outside of that meeting and have all their information. They're really want to engage the community to get input into their plan. And I realized that they had talked with Josh and other city staff. And so they're changing of the guard and generations in this family dealing with this situation. So there will be more news coming from that at some point in the future.
Thank you. ZBA?
Didn't meet. Sorry.
Sorry, I was like, who is it?
I was waiting for him too, actually.
No, I was like, I thought it was fat. I don't know why. I always think it's you. SEMCOG?
SEMCOG, I went to the General Assembly. During the General Assembly, there's usually voting on policy and things like that. Not so much this time. It was held at the Michigan Central Station, which was purchased and renovated by Ford. Amazing building. I love architecture. It was a great thing. Really horrible place to have a meeting because it's this gigantic room with lots of hard surfaces, and even with the public address system, you can't hear anything. So I was like, "Yeah, I get this. It fits with the theme, but I certainly hope they don't do that again." And the theme was developments. And so, we got an overview of what that redevelopment looked like. There was a presentation from General Counsel from Canada regarding the new Gordie Howe Bridge and that partnership between the US and Canada on that. And that poor guy, he was choosing his words very carefully to, be nice, and everybody was gracious in the room and realized that this guy had an awful job that day. But it's a cool project. One of the great things about that project is it's a suspension bridge that has no supports in the water. So this is side to side thing, and there's lots of development around either end of it, things like that. So we'll certainly was intended to increase the partnership between the two countries and more facilitate more commerce. So we'll see how that goes. The other part of this was there were presentations for 3 developments from member municipalities. There's one from Troy, one from Sterling Heights, in which a mall is going to be redeveloped. And they went through that. And then Northville Downs was a racetrack that in the last year stopped operating about a year ago, and they've already started construction on developing that for housing. The mall was interesting because, as with the earlier discussion here, they decided they were going to take control of the process and design what they wanted, and then go out and get to see if developers would come to that. So I thought that was a good model to do. I don't think the end result, the end result is mixed use and businesses and housing, things like that. The very first question after all 3 presentations were done was how much affordable housing was in each of those, and each of the presenters gave a long answer, which basically amounted to none for any of those projects. And the rationale was that these kinds of developments really are not congruent with affordable housing. So I thought that was noteworthy. So a couple of things coming up. Regional Review Committee meets April 3rd. Transportation Alternative Programs, TAP program selections will be discussed at that. That's an in-person meeting. Transportation Safety Action Committee meets on April 9th, and that's a virtual meeting at 2 p.m. And then SEMCOG 101. There's a session on April 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that's for newly electeds to kind of get an overview of what SEMCOG does and what resources are available. And so I'll be going to that, and I hope other people will as well. So that's it. Long report. So.
Good. Watts?
Yes, so we had a good meeting. A few things to lift up, and I know I mentioned this before, around concerns around the surface transportation reauthorization bill. These are funds that need to be renewed by the end of this year. And there was conversation around, one of the questions I asked was, what can we do, and thinking about at the localities, putting forward information or trying to get our electeds and folks to really push for these funds. And there was a lot of, while a lot of folks were like interested and they're like, yeah, now is the time, we do need to start, especially as we move toward the summer, so when that usually the conversations will pick up. But then there also was just concern about, everyone is concerned about being targeted and whatever. So let us not be so concerned that we don't act. But so So there were some things like that. And so one of the things that they're gonna prepare is just some education materials and some language around that we can maybe use for that purpose. So once we get that, so I'll follow up with them, but I'll share it with the rest of council and then try to work on something that we could put forward. We were talking about things that these funds are, fund here. So for instance, the person with AAATA said about 80% of 35 million, their 35 million capital funds is federal funding. Um, and there was a lot of conversation around just the way that the different entities are playing around with language, I guess I'll say, which is to say, like, SIMCOG and the Federal Highway, they're like, well, there's the removal of DEI equity, and they're like, well, you can do it, you just can't say it. So, that there was a lot of that kind of conversation in terms of how that will change up some of the language, and within Watts that that has been part of some language, so that they're going through and removing things like that. And then there's also things, that impacts the kind of data that we have access to. So for instance, environmental justice tools have been removed, so you can't do certain kinds of analysis now where you're trying to look at impacts on a community in certain ways. So that's a challenge around around that. And let me see if there's anything else. Mhm. Yeah, I have some other, but I think that that's kind of general things for us to be thinking about.
Urban County, the next meeting's April 9th. Katie, is there anything out from the last one? Yeah. All right, CDBG funds, okay, and then, yep, next meeting's April 9th. DDA, well, there's a new member that was appointed this evening, Liz Warren, excited to work with her. And then I was asked to share about Sammy Slam. So at your desk, you'll see the flyer has a QR code on it and the stamp card that you can use. And so Sammy Slam will be April 4th to April 18th. 23 businesses have agreed to participate in the DDA, and they're all featuring a sandwich for the passport tour of Ipsy's finest sandwiches. So your passport can be picked up from any participating business or city hall. And then once people have received 2 or more stamps, you can return your passport back into any of those businesses or city hall. Every sandwich purchase is another entry into a raffle to win a $20, $50, or $100 gift card. When you get a chance to see the passport, each of the businesses that are participating has the name of their submission, or well, not submission, but what they're offering. And you'll notice that some of them are very creative and they're not actually sandwiches. They're just their interpretation of a Sammy. And so far I have had the opportunity to just check out a few of them as we prepare for the competition. And it's really cool and people are very excited about it. And I think it's a really great way to not only bring folks into the community, but revitalize and rejuvenate folks to do something fun, and get you into maybe some of the businesses that you have not maybe been to yet. And so yeah, that starts this Friday and it goes for 2 weeks. And wait, what was me? Oh, I was like theatrics for, see, I picked up the flyer and then that was for this.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So Sammy Slam, and I think if we want to see more, fun and kind of exciting things happen in the community, I hope people participate truly in this. It's really cool, and you get to eat a bunch of stuff. Like, why not? And also the restaurant, somebody gets bragging rights for a year of who has the best Sammy in Ypsilanti. So, the best Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
Go ahead, Simon,
You
you
should
should-
TM that now.
Yeah.
Quick question. You were saying that there's the different amounts for the gift card. Is that commensurate with how many stamps you have?
So every stamp gets you another entry into the raffle.
So I don't think so.
So no, as long as you have two, you can enter, and then every stamp
And
after
then
that gets you.
they'll just like be like, because you said there was like a 25 of
Oh yeah, so it's a random selection
Yeah,
of who
out
will
of-
get
yeah,
the different
okay.
ones. Yep. But you have more opportunities to win, the more stamps you get.
I see.
Why do you look so confused tonight?
I'm confused. I'm just really hungry.
Oh,
I know. This is
your brows keep going up. I'm
Right.
like, okay. Yeah, so folks are really excited, honestly, about this, and it starts on Friday. Clerk Virgil?
If you scan the QR code, you will see pictures of all the sandwiches, which is why I'm so hungry.
And they look good. They look good, y'all.
And just to give another shout out to Danya.
Yeah.
If you, I'm assuming you've all seen some of the social media posts that she's been doing for the city. So much fun, so cool.
They're so good.
She's doing a great job.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. So, very, some fun spring activity where you can walk and traverse. You could go on a day if you want to try out 23. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. And try all the Sammys. And then our next meeting is in 2 weeks. Rutherford Pool.
I had a quick
Oh,
question.
sorry. Councilwoman King.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, as city staff or council members, will we be able to participate in getting the gift card?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
You may
I
not
just wanted-
receive the monetary gift, but you can participate
Mm-hmm.
because we can talk about it. My plan is to try,
Mhm.
as many as I can and share about my experience. Because some of these businesses are newer as well, and we're trying to just help folks see what Ipsy has to offer, which we do. We have a lot. 23 businesses are participating. That is a great turnout and of participation in our community. So
Yeah, my goal is to be a superior Sammy Grand Slammer for Ipsy. I'm gonna try and get all 23 if possible
okay.
Okay,
in
listen,
the 2 weeks.
I'll go.
challenges
Let me know.
We'll
We'll go together.
Oh,
Or the Hobbs with
some of my seafood can't eat it.
Still be superior.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, my plan is to try as many as it makes sense. So I encourage everyone to participate because it's fun. That's fun. Rutherford Pool.
I have not connected with them. They haven't had a meeting.
Thank you. I did get a postcard in the mail from the community organization Our House, thanking the Rutherford Pool for allowing them to use the facilities for one of their meetings. So I want to give them a shout out, and I'll get that over to other folks at the pool, the card that they sent. Okay, council proposed business. I'm gonna start with you, Councilmember Tucson, and then I'm gonna just say right now that we just go around the table because I got
Yeah.
Councilmember Tucson.
I would like to just remind, just to remind everyone that Tuesday, April the 8th from 5:30 to around 6:30 p.m. in Ainsworth Circle, I will be hosting the first Walk the Ward, where I'll be walking around the whole neighborhood with residents, taking pictures, answering questions, or just walking around, seeing things. So if anybody would like to come out and bring any information or any questions that they may have or whatever, please meet me right there at the Triangle in Ainsworth. We'll be there at 5:30. Also, I'd like to bring forth that Mr. Witherspoon in the audience here would like to formally invite us to the Violence Intervention Summit on the 28th at 9 p.m. at WCC. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to be held in the Morris Lawrence Auditorium. If I'm not mistaken, that's a 9 to 4 all day event. He also wanted me to raise the youth-driven media and how they can get involved in beautifying the city. So any recommendations that can be given to YDM, please give it to the good brother, Mr. Weatherspoon. They would also like to interview each of the council members on their podcast or on video. And there's also, I'm sorry, just reading the notes. There's also a program, like a community based program, We the People, where individuals participating in this could participate in mock trials, debates, and research projects. And that's something that Brother Witherspoon would like to bring to the city. So I'm pretty sure he's going to be sending us an email with all this information in it. But if you have anything that you would like to offer to Mr. Witherspoon, please get in contact with him. He is here. You can get in contact with him after the meeting. That's all I got.
Councilmember Fellows?
Yes. Just want to thank all the different various events I went to during Ramadan and Eid, put on by EMU student groups and various others, the Students for Justice Palestine, many great iftar gatherings, celebrations, and so much generosity with food. It was just incredible. And lively time in Ypsilanti. So thank you. And also want to thank the warming center. The season has closed at the Freight House. It's community volunteers that are running, basically a stopgap measure for our housing crisis in Ypsilanti. And so it is very appreciated to all the labor and all the support that goes into running a winter season warming center. So thank you to everyone involved. I'm going to mention here, please don't leave until the folks involved with the agenda setting committee checks in, because we have April 4th or April 7th as potential meeting dates. It was mainly Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon. I'm waiting on your answer.
It's in there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good now? We got a date for it?
Good.
Well, I'll check in with you
calendar,
after the
but-
meeting.
No,
So, and then I was gonna bring up the vegetation ordinance is something that I'm interested in bringing to council to review and possibly update, as it is springtime, so it seems like appropriate time to do that. And lastly, I just want to mention, just like, national affairs, I have been following kind of what's been going on with these, illegal detentions by immigration enforcement of basically, student activists like Mahmoud Khalil and others that are being detained without due process and threatened to be deported. And I'm just very disturbed by this. And I think as a community of, immigrants and people involved in, organizing and activism, this is something that we should be, sounding the alarm on and talking about more. So I'm just bringing that up as something that is concerning. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to stay on that theme a little bit on the federal level, which is very much affecting all of us. While we were in this meeting, Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey will have set a U.S. Senate record for the longest speech in Senate history. If you haven't seen it, I would certainly encourage you to spend some time. You may not be able to watch all of it, but I suggest that you should watch at least some of it. It's incredibly passionate, it's fact-filled, and it is absolutely incredible oratory. In fact, I came away believing that he will take his role as one of the great Senate orators from this experience. But it's also necessary. It's necessary because in just 2 months, it's hard to believe, but in just 2 months, among other things, this Trump regime has gutted scientific research, eliminated consumer financial protection, undermined public safety, gutted veteran services, compromised Social Security, moved toward a restoration of international colonialism, and abducted legal residents, to my colleague's point earlier. And tomorrow, the Trump regime plans to put nails in the coffin of our international alliances. Trump calls this Liberation Day. As far as I'm concerned, the only liberation taking place will be for workers who will be liberated from their jobs, and for consumers who will be liberated from their money. Senator Booker has used his voice because the majority party in Congress has lost their voice, effectively ceding legislative power to an increasingly monarchical executive. And why am I raising this issue in a city council meeting? Because everything being done in DC will affect workers and residents in Ypsilanti, Washtenaw County, and throughout Michigan. One might say still that there is little we can do at council, so why spend time discussing? And this is my answer. We face a challenge to our democratic constitutional order that we haven't faced since the Civil War. Senator Booker needed to speak out. Representative Dingell has been speaking out. Other elected officials need to continue to speak out, and we need to speak out, both individually and collectively. We're not out of our lane here. This lane belongs to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm going to stick to local issues here for a minute. Been in contact with Yucca. We've gotten a number of complaints about the holes from assessing the water lines around the city, and there's hundreds of these things around, and people are complaining that they're falling in them and things like that. So, contacted Luke and Mike Beaudry, who's our board member, about that. I know that Mr. McLean is tracking these things on social media for folks, but there's a lot of them. Be careful. Report them to Yucca. They have a phone number that you can do. Sean, who manages that system, is a very responsive person. So just want to encourage people to call Yucca and tell them of the problems. They are gearing up to fill these things in. They're not normal holes that go straight down. They are actually wider underneath the surface than they are above the surface or at the surface. So they're weird things. So they are working on a contract to fill these things. They can't just throw sand in them and have them be done, but they will have a contract to do this in the near future. So that's all.
Councilmember Simmons?
Yes, so a couple of quick things. One, I just as a reminder, we're in April, which means UMS is at the Freight House. So there's lots of great events and things that you can check out on their website. A lot of them are free or pay what you can. And so there's some exciting things for people of all ages. Also, I know I was with a few folks. We got to tour the Huron Vista site and the residents at the Huron over on Clark Road, and as well as the Dorsey Estates, which was interesting, just kind of seeing the updates of the spaces and being able to like talk to folks and ask questions. It was really actually helpful to just hear that in both cases, it seems like some of the things that were put forward in terms of thinking about the populations that we wanted to see in those spaces, it does seem like that is happening in terms of, you know, Ypsilanti residents and folks in the area, low income folks at the Clark Road developments. They said for the kind of family and singles units that I think she told me that about 65% of the folks are voucher holders. And so, and then at Dorsey Estates, they also named a few of the successes in terms of like some of the people in that space. So that was exciting to kind of just to hear and to see those come through. And then also with the information that was shared, other folks reached out from other places. So where people are like, why don't we want these kind of developments too? And, you know, I mean, we're better than the leaders and the best, but we're our own leaders and best. So that's great. And also, just to name, this week, we have a Ward 3 resident who died and has a memorial coming up, and he and his wife both were very active in our ward and area, and in particular around things like pollinator gardens and things like that. And so just want to say farewell to Mark Higby. And so April is Poetry Month, and um, just as we know, I am a poet. I bring that into this space a lot. So one, if you go by Sweetwaters, you can see one of my poems up on the window through the Poetry Town project. So you can walk around. It expanded to Ypsilanti this year. It launched in Ann Arbor a couple of years ago. So this is the first year that they expanded to Ypsilanti. And so there's a whole list of Ypsi businesses that will have people's poems on them. So that's really fun and something else to see for the month of April. As my colleague mentioned, Cory Booker's filibuster is going on. I spent a lot of the day kind of watching it and being moved by it and thinking that that's poetry. So I was going to bring a poem here tonight. Originally, I was going to do a acrostic poem that said Trump is a fascist, which acrostic poems is like this first letter of the line spells something. And so that was my original point, but then I thought that's too on the nose. So instead, I'm going to share a poem that's not quite, it's still in draft form, but knowing that this isn't a time for perfection, but for each of us to simply do something, to literally do anything, to say no, that this isn't a, what we want, and to show that we are prepared for what comes next. So we can go ahead and get from there. So this poem is called Where There's a Will. I dream of waking up with all the colors in my eyes. I dream best with my eyes wide open. I wonder if there's a way to hear all of the stories. I wonder at all the stories being told. What if I love, oh, what if love prevailed in the hearts of all people? What if those people kept us safe? I imagine a time when we stretch toward the horizon. I imagine that horizon is here. I wish we could all recognize our collective power. I wish we could grow our collective. I will build a world bright with biodiversity and possibility. I will build a world where we learn from shared experiences. I will build a world where we all know who holds us. I will build a world that centers audacious love for all beings. I will build a world. I will. Will you too? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
So first, I just want to give an update about the team building. Me and Councilmember Simmons, we have prepared a document. It's not quite ready yet, but it should be ready by the end of this week, Friday, or potentially Monday. City Manager, I do have a question regarding the team building. I was wondering, can we have a special closed meeting depending on the event we choose?
No, you would not be able to do a closed session for that.
Okay. Also, unfortunately, my computer died, but so I don't have the date and time, and I will provide that on my social media, and I will provide it to the city if it's something we can put on the webpage. Community Church of God at 565 Jefferson is offering free tutoring. I believe it's every Thursday, but again, I'm not sure. I will get the date and times to the city, and again, I will post it on my social media. I am planning to potentially have a town hall for Ward 1 on April the 24th, and I would love for the other Ward 1 representatives to be there with me. Also, I spoke with Sean from Yucca this past week for a resident, and I just want to note that he was extremely helpful and even wanted to communicate with the residents directly. And lastly, I attended a celebration for two young men, William P. Clay Jr. and Larry Smith, who have dedicated over 40 years of their services to the community. And I just wanted to highlight that tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Tucson.
Councilmember King, for the town hall on the 24th, what time?
I was thinking from 6 o'clock to 7:30. Again, I don't have it set in stone, but that is a time that I'm looking at.
Oh, thank
Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following up on what Mayor Pro Tem mentioned about the various holes around the community. I have used the email for the Yucca representative, Sean Snap. It's sknapp@ycua.org. And I've taken to just sending him addresses now. He's used to getting those. As I walk around, I see something, I write it down as an address and ship him an email. And so I did about 3 of those emails today, and probably 6 or 7 different places. So that might be as easy as anything. Again, it's sknapp@ycua.org.
You. Okay, couple things. Definitely want to echo some of the things that my colleagues have shared. Number one, much thanks to the staff and the folks who have supported the warming center this season, as it has come to a close. The tours of Dorsey Estates and the Clark Road development. Number one, I mean, I had been before, but it was nice to go with colleagues and kind of like be able to hear some additional feedback and some of the updates on what has happened since I was there in the fall of last year. Much gratitude to Senator Cory Booker. I don't think there's anything else I need to say beyond what my colleagues have already said. And then I want to name that First Fridays will be this Friday in the DDA districts. One other thing, it's just on me to share. So in the spirit of community, it's not local to us, but one of our, Southeast Michigan City, Highland Park is currently experiencing some major issues with water, low water pressure, boil water advisories, and they have no date of when those things will be rectified by the water department. And so I've been asking for donations of water for families in the community. If folks feel it, within themselves, that they would like to participate or support them in those efforts. And they're asking for cases of water, because again, they have no date as to when the low pressure will be corrected, nor the boil water advisory will end. And so Mayor McDonald and I have a really great relationship. And so we've just been kind of communicating about how things are going in their municipality. And it's a struggle. Their city hall has been closed for several days due to this. And so that also impacts their ability to do their work effectively. And so, hoping for a quick resolution for them on that. And again, if folks want to be supportive and have the means to do so, please, reach out. There's some stuff I've shared on Facebook, and I'll continue to share around, donations for them and the free water distribution that they're doing in the community. And then lastly, I was asked to serve as a member of the Presidential Search Advisory Council or Committee for Eastern Michigan University's new president search. And specifically, want to share that there will be listening sessions for different stakeholders in the community on April 9th and 10th. For our body, community leaders will be April 9th from 4 to 4:45 in the Student Center Auditorium. There will be an open session right before that from 3 to 3:45. And then if you are an alumni, they have another session that you're invited to from 6 to 6:45 that day in Ballroom B. There will also be 2 virtual opportunities that are open forums, one on April 10th at 10 a.m. And the other on April 10th at 2 p.m. And Zoom links are on the Presidential Search website. I'll send it out to everyone. I think I shared it probably on Facebook first, but these are opportunities to come and share input in terms of, what you would like to see in EMU's next president. The other piece that we were, tasked to share is just quickly about why this is a closed and confidential search. And that is mainly because, first of all, higher ed is very competitive right now. And if you are looking for, quality folks who may be in different processes or are currently in a role, they are hoping to protect individuals who would like to apply as they come through and have the ability to vet effectively. And so beyond that, there will not be a lot shared until candidates are chosen and interview processes proceed. But there should be an announcement of the next EMU president by November of this year. That is the timeline. And so, very humbled to be asked and happy to represent the city in this process, because as EMU goes, so does the city and such and such and such. They are a huge institution and employer in our community, and so city representation is really important in these processes. That's all for me, city manager.
Just real quick, just a reminder, at the next meeting, we'll be having a presentation regarding the city bonding. The police chief window for application has closed. There are 8 qualified applicants. I'd like to ask council to begin thinking about questions that they would like to ask the chief. We're going to do no more than 2 questions, so we can also fill it out with some others that they suggest. And then again, a reminder that we did set our budget sessions for May 6th, which would be the initial presentation of the budget. May 13th is department presentations, and May 20th will be the second reading. That'll give us a little bit of leeway if we gotta maybe adjourn, or not adjourn, sorry. If we have to table the budget, we can get it on the first meeting in June. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much. City clerk, you have anything? All right, as stated before, the Sustainability Commission's annual report was in our packet. And yeah, I can't put my page right, but seeing nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. I just can't. Yeah, I couldn't reach. Thank you.
4 minutes early. Nice.
Randy,